The chair now recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before we went to the break, I ended off really appealing for us in addressing issues that impact Bahamians to seek to find a way to gain some bipartisan support on some of these issues. Obviously, when poverty strikes in, whether it's Angleton or Marco City or St. Barnabas, it really doesn't stop to check our political DNA. When health-related issues affect our population, and there are many non-communicable diseases and other issues, it doesn't stop to check our politics. And though declining, when crime affects our families, it doesn't stop to check our politics. So I'm not naive, Mr. Speaker. I understand what season we're in, but I'm also keenly aware that more Bahamians than not want leadership that is focused on working across the divide on some matters where neither hard red or yellow or green is going to unilaterally produce or alone produce the results that are required. I also commented, Mr. Speaker, earlier that there are some who simulate or pretend to have some degree of civility in how they interact with you, only to send, I would have said fiery darts, but I believe Scud missiles are more like it, in your direction in a clandestine and cowardly way. Mr. Speaker, nevertheless, I have a responsibility, I believe, to encourage us as a people to find time to turn to each other instead of on each other. And personal defense, that is to constantly defend yourself, shifts the focus from why we signed up, which was to defend the people who we represent and to try and improve their condition. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to turn my attention shortly to speak about the work that our coalition is doing in Marco City. But before I do, I want to thank the members of the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources, BAIC, BAMSI, Bahamas Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority, and all of the departments of the ministry for the work that they continue to put in so that we can improve food security. Mr. Speaker, let me just summarize the case that was made earlier, and that is we have a marvelous opportunity to focus on an area that has been neglected. We've gone backwards as a country in terms of the things we could do to fix the gaps along the value chain in agriculture and marine resources. The policy decisions taken by this government, the introduction of the fisheries bill, which is a landmark piece of legislation, all of these are moving us, Mr. Speaker, in the right direction in terms of wealth creation, employment creation, and making sure we no longer, 10 years from now, are a net exporter of 90% plus of what we consume, but that we are net exporters. This is possible, Mr. Speaker. The multilateral organizations we are collaborating with have been extremely helpful. And I mentioned many of them this morning, the Food and Agriculture Organization, IECA, CADI. But there have been some NGOs that have been extremely helpful. Certainly the entire network of environmental NGOs in the Bahamas, the Nature Conservancy, BRIEF, the National Trust. But there's also been some international ones, World Food Kitchen, that's been very helpful to us in funding farmers and fishers. And of course, the International Red Cross has also been very helpful also. Mr. Speaker, the value chain in the Bahamas has had some very serious challenges. One of them has been logistical. How do we move produce from our family of islands into the main centers, New Providence and Grand Bahama, and how do we get them overseas? We have some members who are in this place. We encourage them with their tremendous resources to build some coalitions so that we could fix the logistical gap, that is cost effectively moving products in between the islands. And we say to the entrepreneurs out there with resources, I want to applaud some of the Grand Bahamians who have gotten into the logistics business, some of the folks from Falco that's looking at air transport, moving agriculture products in between the family islands. We welcome them to also look at moving products by way of sea. That's a major logistical issue where there's a need not just for dry storage, but cool as well as frozen storage. It's not just an issue on the ground in the various family islands that we need to fix, but it's also an issue we need to fix on inter-island transportation. I was pleased with some of the discussions we've had recently with financiers who are minded to put money in that area. Along the value chain, there's also, Mr. Speaker, the issue of sensitizing farmers at the production level that they should ensure that their operations are demand driven. In other words, you produce not what you are familiar with or accustomed to producing, but that you produce what the market demands. And so Sawyer's or Taylor's or Tyler's food store or AML or Super Value, what is it that they are seeking to purchase from you? What is it that the various hotels, small and big, if you produce with the demand in mind, you have targeted customers who you should ink or solidify arrangements with in advance to ensure that we supply the demand in the market. In that way, we avoid the tremendous wastage that we have seen on a number of family islands over the years and for a number of products. As I mentioned earlier, we are using the food processing mechanism, that avenue, to help reduce the wastage, to reduce the import, to carve into that $400 million food import bill in terms of value-added goods. Mr. Speaker, seasonality of crops have been a major constraint that have hindered a number of buyers, food stores, restaurants, hotels, from supporting Bahamian producers. And so in order to tackle this issue of seasonality, that is the occasional availability of fruits and vegetables and flowers, etc., using precision agriculture, smart agriculture allows us to extend the growing season, whether it's shade houses, polytunnels, or greenhouses. We are able to extend the grow season, which allows us not just to function effectively a few months out of the year, but year round. And of course, choosing the correct varieties as well is very important, Mr. Speaker. So I'm grateful to the staff who have been working overtime to assist farmers. We've had tremendous development in the Business Review Committee so that the minister, the permanent secretary, does not become a bottleneck, persons waiting for a proposal to be reviewed, but that we have some very smart technical persons who can go through the proposals, offer guidance as they have been doing. So we've had an influx of dozens of proposals, some by persons who are already funded, and the Policy and Planning Division, as well as the Business Review Committee, which is made up of technical experts from every area, have been able to give some feedback. We've streamlined some of our processes. One of the bottlenecks we had is the slow pace at which you can get a farmer's registration. We've created a provisional farmer's registration. We don't believe it is fair that if somebody has applied in a timely fashion for access to land, and we are taking an inordinate amount of time and they've gotten started on a small parcel they may have access to or in their yard, that they should be hindered from getting a farmer's registration, which is what is needed in order to get land or get duty-free import. We provide them with a provisional farmer's license so that they can get moving. And if they do not fulfill the requirements of a registered farmer, that could always be revoked. But we can't continue to slow people down, taking an inordinate amount of time, getting them the most basic thing. Persons want to import things. In order to get duty-free imports, they must have a farmer's registration. Let's get it to them and let's let them thrive rather than us be a hindrance to them. Mr. Speaker, we have a number of technical persons who can meet the public. So everybody doesn't have to speak, with the minister. In some ministries, the reality is the minister is more of the constraint than the facilitator that can help you. It is better to talk to some technical persons who can move things along. And so, again, we would then recommend to you who is the correct point person to speak to. Mr. Speaker, along that value chain, one of the other issues that we have is this new requirement in the international community, and more so even in the local community, of traceability. Where are you, in fact, getting the marine product from? Are you harvesting it in a sustainable way? Are you managing that particular resource in a sustainable way? And the same thing is true on the produce side. And so this is why we believe embracing new technologies, new methodologies of operating your farm as a business is very important, because the end user wants to know, are they getting this product from a good location? And are the persons who are harvesting it, are they doing it in a sustainable way? Or is that species, whether it's marine or live, is it at risk? Is it at risk of being extinct? Is it being produced in a healthy way that would not adversely affect our health? And so the Bahamas has a team, I believe, of professionals in the agriculture and marine resources sector that's plugged in to these international agencies, multilateral agencies that allow us to adopt and bring onshore best practices from around the world, so that we are lockstep with the international community in again, carrying out the best practices. Mr. Speaker, in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, one of the things that became extremely important is for us to build back better, but always taking into consideration in the agriculture and marine resources sector the possibility of another climatic event, since we're in the hurricane belt. And so we have been very careful in terms of how we conduct courses to ensure that persons who are entering the sector take into consideration new building codes that are important when they are, whether they're building grow houses for poultry or facilities for other livestock. What technology should they use to plant crops? This is why greenhouses are extremely important. This is why using containers that you can actually move in advance of a hurricane is important. This is why where you put certain farming operations is also important. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we are operating a lot smarter in the aftermath of Dorian and, of course, in the midst of COVID. Mr. Speaker, we are working very closely with an organization in the United States, and it is the Trees That Feed Foundation that has been working closely with us, and a Bahamian, talented, gifted Bahamian Terrell, the daughter of an eminent scholar and attorney, Brother Tynes from the incredible island of Grand Bahama. And we have been gifted with about 1,500 breadfruit trees. We really hope to take possession of several thousand over the course of the next year or so, as well as an assortment of fruits. We'll make sure, Agnes, that we get some to you and to each of the constituencies. And so I'm grateful to the team that has been working diligently on this. Mr. Speaker, we have some wonderful partners internationally. We know that one of the concerns that farmers have is Pradel larceny. Sorry, I should call it by its correct name, TFIN, from people's farms. And Mr. Speaker, just recently, Southern Shore has organized a meeting. We are grateful to Andrew Pinder from the Department of Agriculture who participated. And of course, we asked Mr. Malis, who is working on a piece of legislation for us that we hope in prior to the next general election can bring that piece of legislation to address this issue of theft of produce, livestock. Mr. Speaker, I thought others have already given advice on that we should be honest and not take things that do not belong to us. That includes land, fruits, vegetables, livestock, people's partners. I mean, just different things. Mr. Mr. Speaker, we believe that we have an opportunity to create really a vibrant agriculture program. I mentioned earlier the requirement to purchase from Bahamian farmers. As you know, the government is running a very robust program in terms of meeting the food insecurity needs, and that is feeding thousands of Bahamians who periodically are challenged. Mr. Speaker, we are happy that the feeding program, with the assistance of the Ministry with Responsibility for Social Development, and of course, Mr. Susan Lawson and her team, are purchasing items from Bahamian producers as well. So we had a bottleneck with so much items in North Andres. My colleague in the Ministry of Agriculture, the member for North Andres, played a key role along with Mr. Smith from the Feeding Network, DAIC, Mr. John Burrows and that entire team in ensuring that a lot of that excess produce in North Andres made its way into the feeding program. And of course, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, WOPAC, BORCO, it's known by many persons, also played a role with Minister Thompson in accepting the proposal we gave that fishers ought to be given an opportunity. And so we had, I think, $50, $40 vouchers that were made available to residents who could go and get a combo. They could cook lobster, fish as a part of the feeding program. We believe government is spending 27+ million. Imagine 50% of that, 40% of that being spent locally is a shot in the arm to a number of Bahamian businesses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we are to thrive in terms of the marine resources, we need greater surveillance. I'm grateful that colleagues supported our request to hire additional staff in marine resources. And so we have beefed up the complement of staff, which would be necessary since we are increasing the number of marine protected areas that will need policing. We need to have greater surveillance of processing plants and greater surveillance of our waters. Because certainly one of the greatest threats to the success of future generations in the marine sector is unregulated, unreported illegal fishing, IUU fishing, and we intend to act on this. It isn't just the poachers, though they are quite significant. It isn't just the Americans in the north, and they're significant, who are violating our laws, but sometimes it's Bahamians as well. And so we have beefed up the enforcement unit. We have acquired additional vessels sometime on next week. We hope to commission an additional vessel in Grand Bahama. Again, unfortunately, some of the earlier vessels we got were destroyed in Dorian. We do need additional vehicles, and we are hoping that finance would make those available, or any partner out there who love our environment and wish to contribute. We'll take several F-150s if you're minded to, so that we could move the new vessels that we have. And we have some members in here doing quite well who benefit from fishing community, Naughty Lutra being one of them. St. Anne's, we would take donations from you all as well of vessels that can assist. That's a fair trade. Officers, we could make some officers available, but we'd love for you all to contribute some vessels also. And so, Mr. Speaker, the work is a difficult one, but we believe that it will in fact pay dividend. We want to say to the residents in Maikal, in particular those persons in Acklands who have an incredible cooperative that the Prime Minister is going to, in short order, be freeing up the land that he has agreed to ensure that we could sustainably grow cascarilla, so that you could continue not just producing the raw material, but also the oils that have been extracted. And those companies that have been doing it in the past, that we spend some time collaborating with them, because we know that there are other Bahamians who have been involved in that regard. We are beefing up, Mr. Speaker, the section of agriculture not just related to food production, but also non-food items that are important. You would have heard us discuss the potential in industrial hemp, being careful that there isn't cross-contamination between industrial and any other hemp that may eventually become legal. So zoning is going to be an important issue there. But Mr. Speaker, we want to single out the Minister of Education, who has been a consistent partner with us as we seek to put additional hydroponics and aquaponics systems in the school and to also eventually roll out the youth cadet program. We want to say publicly how appreciative we are of Minister Lloyd, the member for South Beach, and his team, in particular Patrice Green, and all of the agriculture educators and food economics, as well as food nutrition teachers in the school, who many of them have volunteered to be an extension of our extension program, providing education and capacity building for farmers in family of islands. And so Minister Lloyd has not only given moral support, but he has spent money to ensure that we source greenhouses. You would recall during our food emergency program, we ordered 100 hydroponic systems. They were oversubscribed before we even got started. Jerry Kelly and the team in the Policy and Planning Division did an excellent job bringing them on shore. We've ordered another 150 from overseas, and we've ordered a number of them locally from Bahamian producers, and all of those will go very quickly. We are pleased that that program has gone very well. So has the family or the community garden program, and we are developing community gardens on a number of islands, and we'll be working closely with the Over the Hill program and Minister Romal Ferreira and the Prime Minister in developing some community gardens in historic Over the Hill communities. The backyard program has just simply exploded. More than 20,000 kits prepared, distributed. We expect by year's end will be well over 30,000 kits distributed throughout the country. And aside from that, a number of seeds have also been produced and have actually been distributed throughout the community. And so we're grateful to IECA for their contribution to that, to CARDI and to other agencies that have assisted us in this regard. Mr. Speaker, we have also started a very exciting project called the Agro Village Project. We are going to break ground by the end of this month at Gladstone Road on 35 acres, and it will be a cluster of smart farms, various productive systems, persons growing traditional bush tea and as well as teas, persons producing various fruits and vegetables under greenhouse, composting, producing eggs as well as poultry meat, producing rabbit as an alternative source of protein, a wide range of productive systems in an integrated environment with a welcome center that will have retail stores, juice bar and cafe, where items sold will be sourced from the Agro Village itself. We'll have a technology store selling a variety of agriculture technologies, sensors, drones, etc., as well as we will have training facilities that we have gotten commitments from the Food and Agriculture Organization and IECA to help us set up a Fab Lab where you can research agriculture globally, where you could interface with various training agencies and build capacity of Bahamian farmers. Cabinet has approved the pilot both for New Providence and in Grand Bahama, and then 4 others thereafter. We will work with the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Rupert Hayward has been doing an exceptional job as we seek to establish an agro village in Grand Bahama, which will be a site that will attract international as well as national agribusiness persons to operate within this space, for lack of a better term, a kind of Silicon Valley of farming. And so that is underway in Grand Bahama in terms of the planning, the networking, etc. We are working also on the Blue Action Lab, which again has been spearheaded by the Grand Bahama Port Authority and has attracted international attention, funding, and awards. And the Ministry with responsibility for marine resources is happy to partner with the Grand Bahama Port Authority in this regard. Recently, I had the opportunity to speak at the Economies conference on oceans and commented on this important initiative that we are working on in a collaborative way. We think it's going to be a game changer. Imagine various businesses and non-governmental agencies working side by side on a wide range of marine species, conducting studies, growing certain species that are in danger to ensure that we could keep the sufficient supplies where we are mandated in this fisheries bill to have management plan for every marine species. Well, it's important to be able to monitor, to ensure that you're hitting targets so that it's not just a whole bunch of activities and you don't have a way of measuring whether or not the activities you're engaged in are in fact producing results, Mr. Speaker. And so we are quite encouraged. We are also encouraged by the work being done by our working group looking at the statistics, agriculture statistics. We were disappointed. We didn't have a census thus far because out of a census, we then look to do an agricultural census. But nevertheless, we've been conducting surveys with farmers and fishers around the country, seeking to get empirical evidence in terms of how much is being produced or harvested. What are the intervals? What are the different species, marine species? What are the different varieties being produced by farmers? So that we're in a position when we talk to buyers to give them a sense of what's available in the local market. And so, Mr. Speaker, the Policy and Planning Division has been doing a wonderful job along with BAIC in sourcing that information. We need farmers and fishers to cooperate even more. One of the things we're doing is building a management information system to capture data that is available for investors, for buyers, for producers, for members of the public, and producing apps. We worked with IDB on an app, the Food and Agriculture Organization on an app, so that we are in a position to allow members of the public to sign on to find out if you're looking to get some cabbage, tomatoes, lettuce, where do you go, what are the various prices, etc. If you are a producer and you're trying to get a sense of the weather forecast, you're able to get that information as well. A whole host of information is available through these technologies. Mr. Speaker, before I pivot to what we are doing and plan to do in Marco City, I just want to underscore the work that is being done by Carlos Pugh. He is the gentleman who IDB had retained to assist us in the studies of boutique agriculture. We've laid 4 reports in this house. He is now working with our entire team in helping to produce a strategic plan for the Bahamas in agriculture. It's important to have a blueprint on where you're going and some timelines in terms of when you expect to get there. And so we are happy that this project is going on in earnest, Mr. Speaker. And just before I pivot, one final thing relative to cannabis. Mr. Speaker, I would have mentioned just a moment ago in one of the interviews that I've done that the Marijuana Commission, as you know, is in the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister is going to determine ultimately who has carriage for that. The Ministry of Agriculture was asked on several occasions to interview groups that were looking at both cannabis as well as industrial hemp, et cetera. And we've been in a number of discussions. I want to say again, because some persons seem not to have gotten the message. At the front of the line relative to any cannabis business in the event that it comes online will be Bahamian. It'll be primarily an indigenous business, and foreigners can participate as strategic partners, but certainly minority partners in Bahamian companies. And those persons who have traditionally done well in a whole host of other areas are unlikely, that is, Bahamians are unlikely to be to the front of the line for opportunities that exist. We believe that all Bahamians should be entitled to opportunities that exist. But I can tell you, persons who have been historically disadvantaged, particularly in this field, should be given special consideration. And I believe it is the view of our colleagues that we should make sure that people who have been marginalized and disenfranchised are at the front of the line. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to extend condolences to the families of persons who have passed. The Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources, we've had a very, very difficult year, having lost a number of our team members, and we want the family to know that you are in our thoughts and in our prayers. One of my classmates was among those who had passed, Dr. Maurice Isaacs, outstanding veterinarian, incredible, not just in the Bahamas, but on the international scene. He's recognized and respected by CITES, where he was a member for more than 20 years. And what I absolutely loved about Dr. Isaacs, even when it irritated you, is he spoke his mind. I mentioned earlier, I'm frontal. I tell you up front what my views are with respect to you and to your views. I don't do that traditional political thing where you throw a Scud missile designed to destroy somebody, and then you see them and say, "I can't believe they did that to you." Politicians are famous for doing that. Some more than others. However, Dr. Isaacs, he was one of those persons who was upfront and candid. He told you candidly what he thought, even when you thought it was an inopportune time. And so I certainly want to again extend condolences to him. And then, of course, he is also relative to Senator Dotson Isaacs, and so we extend condolences to her as well. He was a Tuskegee boy, so all of us who went to historically black schools, in my case, Tuskegee University in Alabama, so did Dr. Isaacs, and so did McAllen Stubbs, who worked at BAMSI, who was also passed. So Mr. Speaker, just as an aside, I'm correct, Minister Lloyd's brother, just as an aside, I go to a lot of funerals in Grand Bahama, unfortunately. I believe the last set of figures we looked at before the last several months where persons have passed in Grand Bahama, I think about 170 persons over the last 3.5 years have passed in Marco City. And you could add to that several dozen more because the figures had not yet been updated. One of the things that struck me, and it happens every weekend I'm sitting in a funeral, how fragile life is. And so sometimes you cry in a funeral. Sometimes it's for the person who's perished, who's died, who's passed away. And sometimes it's for yourself and your family, because you can't help but think about your own mortality while you are at these funerals. And what is so disconcerting, sometimes you're at a funeral, and most of the funerals I've been to have been some incredible, wonderful people who are contributing to national development. And you could think about 20 other persons you would have gladly substituted in their place, who you believe are not making any contribution and who are just dangerous, right? And I've thought it. I've thought it on more than one occasion, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the Holy Spirit don't play. Every time I have thought about several other persons I could see in the coffin, the Holy Spirit say, "Do you know that you are on several other people's list who they could see in the coffin?" So that bit of self-righteousness that we feel from time to time, the Holy Spirit intervenes and cures us from that. Because none of us have the authority to put people in heaven or in hell or take them out. But Mr. Speaker, I was saying about these funerals, as I sit there, funerals are the times where you have the clearest thinking, at least for me, where you know what is important. Because now it's over. When I've lost relatives in the last year and a few months, I've lost 2 brothers that my mother has buried, Sister Laura Benson. Absolutely love you, Mom. And your mind is clear. Those things that you made big deals are so irrelevant in that moment when this person is gone. And some of the screams you hear in the funeral are relatives who realize this person will no longer be there. And some of the beef they had with them, some of the I love you they didn't share with them, they no longer have an opportunity. And I wonder, in many of these funerals, if we could have only bottled, if we could only capture the clearness of thought, the purity of heart that we feel towards each other in that moment, and somehow live that out the rest of that weekend, next week, the next month, the next year. I mean, Bahamians are, I guess, like human beings, we are given to backsliding. And so we often leave the funeral where we feel our humanity and want to be good to each other and return to our dirty ways. But Mr. Speaker, every weekend, I go to support constituents and their families because it is a difficult thing to lose a loved one at any time, but certainly in these times. Mr. Speaker, and of course, members of the Marco City constituency, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to share for the remaining moments, Mr. Speaker, the work that we have been doing in the constituency of Marco City. Mr. Speaker, we have sought to build a coalition in Marco City, and I see the member for West End and Bimini here, and of course the member for Pine Ridge, two of my colleagues in Grand Bahama. And they can vouch. We have built a coalition that don't watch colors in Grand Bahama. We have made it a point to say to workers, we have at least 6 full-time persons working in our office in Grand Bahama. The constituency office is open 6 days a week. And up until December of 2019, we was open 7 days a week after Dorian. And the persons who work in that office, and those who didn't get it are not there now, that we believe that after an election, you should be focused on helping all the constituents, not carrying out a litmus test to figure out what color people are. In Marco City, we were successful then in winning every polling division and substantially. Mr. Speaker, it is impossible for us to have done that with just the base of the Free National Movement. We needed independents. We needed persons from the Progressive Liberal Party. We needed the Petros. We needed the Betty Sweetings. We needed Mama Gold. We needed Mama Shakespeare. We needed all of them to make it happen. We needed Billy. So, Mr. Speaker, we sought to build a coalition. That coalition has survived. There are persons who are from different political organizations who we embrace. They are family, and we do not make a distinction between them. What does that do? That coalition allows persons to be responsive when we send out a call that there are some residents who need help and we don't have the resources to assist them. Now, Marco City, Mr. Speaker, maybe that's true too, but that there's the person, but I don't know. But Mr. Marco City, you should behave. Marco City, Mr. Speaker. Marco City has been a constituency that has had the largest, Mr. Speaker, food relief program we believe, in the country. We've spent well over $50,000 just on food to feed residents. And Mr. Speaker, it is still not enough because people are challenged at this time. The government has spent over $27 million apart from the regular food program. But, Mr. Speaker, it's still not enough. And we want to thank the Bahamian Association in Florida, the National Association of Bahamians in Florida. We want to thank Yvonne Ruddock, who contributed to our program, some of the companies in Grand Bahama, Dionisio Diagula, who has also assisted, and several members in here who don't know yet, but they'll write a check to assist us as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we also want to say a special thanks to those who have assisted our hurricane relief program. Today at Contractors Direct, we are running an account and we send persons weekly with purchase orders to get building supplies for their homes. We never stopped since Matthew. We have continued to do this. So this is not about an election. Plus, you have to be slow if you believe that by helping somebody today is going to translate necessarily in their vote tomorrow. Bahamians have as much swing in them as the average Bahamian politician. So we don't do it for that reason. We do it as if unto God. And if they support us later, fine. So we continue to run the hurricane relief program, but we need additional help. The DRA has spent a tremendous amount of money, I believe, Minister Edgecombe, in excess of $15 million just on the small home repair program, but it still isn't enough. We still have some roofs that are leaking. And so I don't mean to offend anyone who have encouraged me that I got to get my team on the ground fully regaled. But quite frankly, I would rather knock on doors right now asking people how could I fulfill the mandate I promised in 2017 to knock on their door asking them for support. Because for me right now, that's not the time. The time is how do I help that person in Gladstone Terrace or Redwood Lane with a few sheets of plywood and some felt to plug that hole? How do I get a Brother Sanders out of the loop, or Brandon out of the loop, or 5-0 to go and touch somebody's roof or drywall to help them before we go back asking them for support? Mr. Speaker, a number of programs we work with. We work, for example, Norris Bain and I ran against each other in the last general election. Norris Bain and I, there were some tough moments, but our friendship today, Mr. Speaker, is intact, and we work hand in hand, assisting as many residents, not just in Marco City, but other constituencies in Grand Bahama. And so, yes, he is working diligently to help us meet the needs in our constituency. So, Mr. Speaker, we have had some challenges. Many residents have also lost their appliances, fridge and stove. And so we are grateful to the Bahamian Association in Florida and the US that have partnered with us, and several residents who have been working diligently. Today, we've touched over 20 families in the appliance replacement program, primarily fridge or stove, in some cases both. We've also, Mr. Speaker, spent a tremendous amount of resources because many persons are being evicted because it is a difficult time. So we've assisted, whether it's with utilities and other things, just to make sure there's a measure of comfort. It is unsustainable, the rate at which we are going, but it has been difficult to turn persons away. We don't always get it right. We don't have the kinds of resources as numbers 1 and 2 opposite have, or as Freetown and St. Anne's, and we can name a few others, the North Lutra have. But whatever we have had, we have sought to spend assisting the community. I forgot Kalani. So Mr. Speaker, we run an entrepreneurship program every year where persons are trained in business development, and at the end of that program, we make available a small amount to get them started, $5,000. We will take partners in the community who can help us do more than 5,000. And we assist in a number of ways to help people get their business organized. Mr. Speaker, in Marco City, one of the things that struck me is how members of not just our executive in the constituency, but members of the volunteer coalition have challenges of their own, and yet they would volunteer to go and help other members of the community. We see this in the aftermath of Matthew. Since the election, we've seen it in the aftermath of Dorian. Persons who have not yet relocated in their house, who haven't gotten back in their house, have been busy helping people who are hurting. And that's why I find it a bit disconcerting when persons try to drive a wedge between residents by spending inordinate amount of time identifying who's F&M, who's PLP, who is DNA. Because that's not the metric that we use to determine who we are going to work for. And then the folks who come from Nassau are clearly out of touch because they come with the Nassau tribalism in a constituency where people are trying to get along to help each other. And the persons who come out of Nassau, they could be from any color, who come out of Nassau, they actually making real money. They are making a tremendous amount of money. But they're not coming to transform people's lives. They're coming, I believe the word was, to titillate, to excite those who they believe would listen to them, that we should behave in the same old tired, tribalistic ways when people need genuine assistance. Mr. Speaker, Abaco and Grand Bahama are in a similar situation. Our people are hurting. And what we need is a coalition that is going to work together with each other. What people decide when they get in the booth is up to them later on. I told people that I don't mean any disrespect, colleagues, bear with me, I don't mean any disrespect. When I said, when I signed up for this, I didn't sign up to kiss the emperor's ring or to be held hostage by a voter. In other words, I respect the team that I'm on, those with whom I work, grateful for every opportunity that I could serve on a bigger platform. And to the voter, I said, don't tell me you got 8 votes. Don't tell me you got 8 votes in your house when you are about to ask me for assistance, because it isn't because of the potential amount of votes that I'm helping. It's because this is my duty. In fact, this is my life work. This is what I want to do. I enjoy being a part of empowering people. Empowering people, Mr. Speaker. And that is the kind of culture we want to create in the Marco City constituency. There are persons who threaten you. I mean, it happened last election. And right now, today, Mr. Speaker, it's happening. People threaten you. Oh, I'm going to say this about you. I'm going to release this on you. And then what? And then what? And then what? Then what? Because this is not the only place you could serve. So if there's something so troublesome, so problematic in my private life, because it can't be anything related to the ministry. I've governed in that ministry impeccably, no unethical or illegal behavior, and didn't spend time trying to unearth the ones that we may have found, because that wasn't my job. That's the auditor's job. Our job is to try and meet the needs of people. But I want to say, I want this to be absolutely clear, that I absolutely believe I've been called to help to empower persons. And when the persons who I serve decide that I'm no longer the person to represent them, I will not hold them in disdain. I will thank them for this privilege to be in this place. Because we have some brilliant Bahamians out there who could have very well been where we are. Some of this is preordained and some of it is fortuitous. And so I make the point, so whether I'm in here or out there, I'm going to serve my people regardless. And so, Mr. Speaker, nobody could hold me hostage. Nobody could seek to blackmail me. There's nothing you could release that, as far as I'm concerned, if ever I make a bad decision, I just man up and handle the consequences of those bad decisions. But what you shouldn't do is put lies that don't belong to me on me. And so, Mr. Speaker, in Marco City, the fight that I want to engage in is not with FNMs on the inside or those who support the PLP, or with the leader opposite, or the deputy, or with independents. The fight is with those things that are derailing the condition of our people. I want to fight, Mr. Speaker, I want to fight against the nonsensical, maniacal approach of some who wish to have power, and in the course of pursuing power, they are busy telling the constituents who I love that, listen, if you go with me, all you're going to have to do afterwards is sit home and collect a royalty check from the Sovereign Wealth Fund for $100,000 without being industrious as a Bahamian, diligent as a Bahamian, deciding that you're going to be brilliant as a Bahamian. That's what I want to fight against. The dumbing down of information to deceive people who are desperate in the moment, taking advantage of the desperation of people. What I want to fight against is the uneven distribution of wealth in this country. And sometimes there's a difference in wealth. Sometimes people work for other people because the persons who run the company have been more diligent, oftentimes, and have made the necessary arrangement for their families. Fine. There are some times that other persons have gained advantage through cronyism and nepotism and have ended up where they have ended up. I believe a part of our role when we come in this place is to empower people who have been marginalized and disenfranchised, to create an environment where those who are minded to succeed can succeed if they wish to be diligent. What I do have a problem with is how narrow our discussions have become as we try to negotiate that issue. That is, creating an environment where those who are minded to succeed can succeed. I use a practical example. Sorry, forgive me just for a few minutes. Let me just keep it real. Let me keep it real. We had a discussion in this place, even though everybody knew that the responsibility of a member who is conflicted in a matter, conflicted just simply means that they are minded to do a business deal, but given on where they sit, they have some obligations by Parliament, by the Constitution to come and report. There was one such discussion with the post office that was going on. I didn't weigh in on that issue at all, but I heard the ways in which the issue was twisted left, right, and center. And I sat in my seat, and you know what I was thinking about? I was saying, this is the wrong discussion on both sides. Because the discussion isn't about should the Simonettes have gotten the contract or not, or should it have gone to the other place on Gladstone Road, the owner of that fills it. That wasn't the discussion for me. The discussion is, how is it that administration after administration, we cannot so empower so many Bahamians that it wouldn't even be a discussion about whether 5 or 6 families could get the same contract over and over. So we are discussing having not changed structurally the amount of Bahamians who are so empowered that you could pick, choose, and refuse from 100 different options for the right facilities where any post office can go. Mr. Speaker, that is what I want to dedicate my life to. That there are so many people so empowered that it is no longer newsworthy. That's what we should be about. Not trying to figure out, should this one have gotten it or not, that one. Why is the discussion only about those groups? Mr. Speaker, what I want to fight against is all of the non-communicable diseases that's devastating our people, and we haven't had the courage to take the hard decisions to ensure that we change those things in the system that perpetuate it. It should be a non-issue that we raise tax extremely high on sugary products that is devastating people's lives. Some decisions you're going to make will not get you reelected, but it can save some lives. Grand Bahama, I am happy as a member of this team that is fixing the Rand Memorial Hospital. But if we were to stop there, it is not enough. We need a facility in Grand Bahama that is climate smart, that is multi-storied to meet the needs of people. So forgive me if I don't tour at plenty, because I won't tour no more. I want that to open, then I want us to build the next one. That's what we need to do. That's what I want to fight for. Because it's hard to explain to people when their loved one die and there isn't sufficient facilities to treat them on a cosmopolitan island. And that isn't just a responsibility of government, that's a responsibility of the Grand Bahama Port Authority, the investors who are in Grand Bahama, Bahamian and otherwise, because it is in our collective interest that we work together in order to meet needs. Mr. Speaker, what I want to fight against is the level of selfishness that we have in this country as a people, where it's all about me. I see it, I often say to farmers, that if you don't form a cooperative, here's what happens. When Atlantis or AML or Super Value is ready to purchase, they really don't have the time to talk to 500 farmers. It is easier to talk to a producer organization that represents a cohort of farmers so that they can regularly get the supply. So in a group of 20, if 10 have a catastrophic problem and cannot supply, for example, if they're producing tomatoes, the other 10 can fill the gap and still meet the supply, and there's no disruption in the supply chain. In the same way, in other areas in our national life, we have to find a way as a people to come together. So we in Grand Bahama. Why are more families not bulk buying? Why are we not pooling some resources to buy sufficient items to make sure that no one suffers? As I sit in a funeral, think about this for a moment. I sit in a funeral, and clearly, well, COVID restrictions are not being observed based on the number of people. But if you have 150 persons in a funeral, another 150 on the outside, another 200 watching by Zoom, that's one person in that coffin dead. Some of those persons, Mr. Speaker, they died from stress and frustration. A senior citizen who died while the light was off, and they were struggling to pay all the other bills because the children and grandchildren were unemployed or didn't pull their weight. You can't tell me that 300 plus people whose lives were affected by the loss of that one life could not have found a way to pool resources, to touch that one life and to prolong it in the way we dealt with them, by reducing the stress level, by throwing in a $5 here or there to make sure that light is on. Mr. Speaker, we have to find a way not to cry in the aftermath of the tragedy, but to head off the tragedy with a humanity that's different than what we have right now. Mr. Speaker, some days, and I've had many, I don't get it right, but I know, Mr. Speaker, that if we pull together, if we decide we are going to cooperate with each other, we could change some of the conditions in Agro that individually we cannot change. I have no illusions about us in here. 39 can't consistently be right over 400,000. We have some brilliant people out there, and that's why I believe, Mr. Speaker, and why we try in Marco City to take advice. Right now, in Mayfield Park, we are building a park. We just poured the basketball court. The gazebo is going up now. The playground equipment, thanks to St. Barnabas, is about to be installed, and we're going to work with the Tennis Association to build a mini tennis court. And we're doing a community garden, and that is going to be powerful. Mr. Speaker, we are making progress. But this isn't just about doing a park, Mr. Speaker, in Mayfield Park. There have been for 20 years successive administrations we've been trying to do a park in Mayfield Park. And it would be a nice little thing to say, all of a sudden, we got it done this time. But no, Mr. Speaker, we are getting that park done because we talked to David Thompson. We talked to Pleasant Bridgewater. We talked to Greg Moss. We talked to Chicago Lang. We talked with every former member of parliament to get guidance on how to approach this so that we could get this far. And it is because of our collective conversation with each other that we are closer to getting done, which was their dreams as well. So when that park is birthed, that's not going to be just a birth of a free national movement, Marcos F&M candidate. That's going to be the combination of the David Thompson, of the Pleasant Bridgewater, of the Chicago Lang, of the Greg Moss, all of us having an impact on that area along with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and Arthur Jones who own the land. And so Mr. Speaker, it is that collaboration. We're building a second park between Adventurers Way and Four Bishops Circle and Carver Drive. That is going to be a community garden that also has a park on it. And so we are seeing unprecedented interest. We are grateful to to Constantina Hamilton, to Jerry Kelly, to Quinta Forbes, to all of the person. Local government is playing a key role under the leadership of Kendall Culmer, Steely. All of these persons are playing a role in helping us with the second part that's going on. We hope to finish that recreational component of that, Mr. Speaker, over the course of the next month and a half or so. The basketball court will be completed, we believe, within a month. The mini tennis courts for little children. We believe we're going to make steady progress. Again, that is a collaborative project. And while we can't speak about the island-wide tech hub, we believe that progress is being made in the digitization of government. In a number of ways, we have moved the process forward. But in Marcos City, we have just gone through a rezoning exercise. We've gotten 51% of the residents in the Sunrise subdivision to agree that we can convert a building that we have acquired on Gambia Drive into a tech hub. And so we are excited about building that tech hub, working with persons from all sides of the divide. We have some brilliant persons in this country in the area of technology. We have Brother Allen and his brother Azan. We'll utilize them. We have in our community Brother Hepburn, again, smart in technology. We will utilize him. We will use the educators in our area, all of them, to help us make sure that this facility succeed. And so we're asking the Grand Bahama Port Authority, please let us move quickly. We expect that we should have all of the approvals over the course of the next 14 days so that we could get on with the business of transforming that tech hub. So Mr. Speaker, again, we are doing this because we believe this can empower residents. We are also, so if you're out there and you're in Marcos City, you have a building in Pioneers Loop or Coral Reef, we are looking to acquire a couple of buildings so that we can help the young men who are interested in a recording studio. Apart from the one that is going to be in the tech hub, we want to put a community-based studio together. We sponsored someone after the last general election, but now we want to make it a corporate center. And so please let us know. We are very much interested in acquiring the building at recessionary rates. So please make sure the price making sense. We also want to do the same thing so we could create a handicraft center. So I go to too many houses and persons have to use their house for creation storage when we could get a facility. And so, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the things that we are doing in Marcos City. We're also advocates for our people. That's why we want to say the Brenzel role, the member for Golden Gate. We are grateful. Garden Hills. We are great. Sorry, I wasn't trying to be prophetic, Michael. My bad. So I want to say to the member for Garden Hills how grateful we are in Grand Bahama. In less than 6 weeks, and if you would have spanned it over 6 months, 3 times within 6 months, the team from National Insurance and Public Service met with residents in Grand Bahama and addressed their issues. Mr. Speaker, we sent him 90-something names of persons who had vexing issues. Their team researched the issues, created a matrix. By the time they got in the meeting, a number of the issues were answered. Not all, but quite a few. We are grateful. We believe that in Grand Bahama and Abaco in particular, what we need are these regular virtual meetings where the concerns are sent to the respective government agency. The government agency then research those issues, and they are able to answer them. So imagine in Cat Island, for example, all the names come forth with what the issues are, and social services and urban renewal or NIB are able to answer it. Mr. Speaker, I cannot tell you how many calls we got where there were persons so grateful that an issue that they had for years was clarified. Some of them didn't get the resources they had in mind. Some discovered they weren't entitled and they could accept it, but they never got a clear enough answer. Some persons had their issues resolved. Our job is really to facilitate the empowerment of these persons. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to all of those persons in our coalition in Marco City, we appreciate you. The sacrifice, we don't always see eye to eye, but we appreciate you. The sacrifice you continue to make. I was on the park the other day speaking with a young man. He said, after Dorian, the fact that the bus came through, he said people were thinking about us. So with the bus going through now, let me just be for the sake of balance. We did have some people say my bus came through the corner and we didn't pause long enough, so they didn't benefit, except that we apologize. But there were others who said the fact that they saw people coming through, and it wasn't just us, it was many church groups, NGOs, etc. And that's why I said to them, listen, let's make sure that bus is up and running, and any of you wish to contribute a second bus, we could use 2 or 3 of them. But we want to make sure that people do not suffer in silence. Too many persons in our communities are suffering in silence. And so, Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue the community work with the parks, with the tech hub, with the entrepreneurship program. We'll resume doing the festivals once we emerge on the other side of this. We'll continue supporting schools with tablets and equipment when required. We'll continue supporting churches, helping with repairs and making contributions. And we'll continue where we can to help with some of the personal challenges people have, medical being one of them. Mr. Speaker, there are colleagues in here who would recommend that we go and see persons. And we gladly go and do it, Mr. Speaker, because we believe this is a part of our mission in life. And so as I take my seat, I want to say to the corporate community in New Providence and in Grand Bahama, there is still a need for a lot of basic necessities by persons who were ravaged by Dorian and who are still plagued by this pandemic. The other day, a lady who I've grown to love so much had some comments about us, and she was saying, you know, well, I see them recently, and they were comments that stung, Mr. Speaker. It didn't sting me because I had a couple of days before I actually heard it, but it stung some people who know that area very well. My first response when I hear something unfavorable is I try to go to the source. I will know what is it I can do to be of assistance. So if I buck you in the food store, my wife actually allocates some extra time when I go to the food store, right? So because you know I shop just on the edge of Marco City, member for East Grand Bahama. I shop on Seahorse primarily, and so I went to see her. And Mr. Speaker, I felt her pain. Some of our folks are not in a position to be mobile. And so we have to have an impeccable record of who are those persons who have physical disabilities in our community so that we are able to find them and consistently work with their families as a partner to assist them. That's why I salute Howard Bo Ching, who spends time working with members of the community who have physical disabilities. And so we want to be partners with the children and the grandchildren to help. We don't carry on like we is anybody's savior. I tell people, I'm your partner. I'm one of 3, 4, 5 people in your life. The constituency is your partner. We're not your savior because some of us got problems of our own. And so when I spoke with her, I realized there's people have real needs. So if you're out there as a corporate citizen, listen, we need assistance in terms of many of you are throwing away appliances that still work because you're upgrading, you know, Sister Miriam, Michael, they're upgrading to 2 doors, you know, a refrigerator. Somebody will work with that 18 cubic inch and so forth. Yeah. Some people are throwing away washer because they now have the silver one with the see-through glass. But in a pandemic era, that washer could be useful to someone. Some people need a king-size bed, that if they're in a wheelchair, they roll out of that onto the bed as opposed to a bed with a box spring and frame. There are some practical things we could do to change some lives. The folks the folks along Fiddler's Green and along East Indian Man, we are seeking to pave some of the roads. I want to be clear. Road paving in private subdivision is clearly not the government's responsibility, but we ask the minister with responsibility for public works to throw a blow to assist us. And now that Hudson got some assistance, we feel we're in a strong moral position to say, throw a blow for Fiddler's Green and for Bluebell Circle along Fiddler's Green and East Indian Man. We have a member in here who I believe have a paving company. We will say to him as well, we welcome Nasuvians in this case in Grand Bahama. We'll take their hot mix and cold mix as well to assist residents. And so we are seeking to help along Fiddler's Green. I believe local government is organizing a meeting shortly with you, and we're going to work with you. Bluebell Circle, we put water in last election. We believe that should be the first area we touch in terms of sand sealing that particular road. But residents have to also throw a blow. There's too many private subdivisions allowed developers to get away with murder. They came in, they built the homes, they didn't put in the infrastructure as was agreed, and then years later, it becomes the politician's responsibility. No, I'm a partner. So I'll work with residents where the developer still lives. We can always take out a class action suit against them. I'm big on suing. And so whatever is required, we then need to get them to join us as we help pave the road. It doesn't make sense in 2021, people are still breaking up their cars in a cosmopolitan city because they have big craters in the road. And so we are going to work with the Minister of Public Works, with some of the private companies, with War Construction, in order to try and remedy those situations. Mr. Speaker, let me close by pivoting to something very personal. We just celebrated International Women's Day. I believe that there's a powerful speaker out of the United States, a member of the Nation of Islam, who made the point that women go to the door of death and come back and bring life. And it is unfortunate that so many times we have not given the appropriate tribute and due to women who have made phenomenal contributions, not only in our personal lives, but in our national life. Mr. Speaker, when I was in school being, I say mischievous, but it's true, it's bad. I remember I was in arithmetic. You know, back then they used to make the distinction between arithmetic and math. I remember I was demoted in the arithmetic class because Miss Pratt was the teacher and she could control me. I never recovered in math, by the way, all the way up to the master's level. But she made an indelible impression in my life. I remember when I was suspended from high school, suspended twice and expelled on the third time. I had a former politician who told me, Mr. Speaker, I shouldn't tell these testimonies because by the time the machinery over there finished with me, I would have been, they changed suspension from, I was picked up by 10 officers and carried out of school. But I was suspended twice and expelled from A.F. Adley. And I was readmitted after R.M. Bailey didn't accept me the following year. Mr. Speaker, I was readmitted into A.F. Adley on the basis of the character of Sister Laura Hepburn Benson. My mother is largely responsible for just the transformation of my life. I've heard her cry, Mr. Speaker, praying for husbands who didn't behave well, for children who didn't behave well, but yet crying on her knees, praying for us, not for herself, for us. And my mother has, when I have doubted if there was a God or if it was a he, she, or it was her abiding faith that convinced me that I needed to stay prayed up. And no matter how many times I fall spiritually, that I go back to God in my private moments, not for public consumption, to get my soul right. And I remember in Yellow Elder, where one of the neighbors I grew up, I told you before, we moved through many corners. My mother was saying, you know, God, I praise you and I magnify you. And I'm standing in the hallway near blaspheming against God because I'm like, what is she thanking God for? We in a small house, cramped, with a hot kitchen. What could she possibly be thanking God for? But she had the peace that passeth all understanding. And Mr. Speaker, that's what we need in times like these. We need that anchor that's able to sustain us when all else fails. When the intra-party and inter-party politics fail you, you need that anchor. And as I salute women, I salute my mother, Sister Laura Benson, who was a consistent example despite challenges she had to not only be a mother in all ways to her children, but to every child in the neighborhood. And as I close, to my wife, like many of the wives of husbands in here, who endure us. In fact, most of us have married well, because women who are married to politicians, partly because of their frailty, and part because of what they are subjected to in the public domain, and part of what some of them subject other people to. Mr. Speaker, we have to salute the women that endure the men who have unfortunately, in many ways, been tainted by the griminess of the politics in this country. And so I want to say to my wife that I thank you. I was told by DOC to talk to his own as well. Thank you for your sacrifice. Amen. Thank you when you see me spend the bulk of the family savings in Grand Bahama in the constituency. And yet you have stood by me when I did not deserve it. Thank you, and I love you, and I appreciate you. And to my daughter, when I pray for the spirit in you, I pray that you take your baby spirit. She's good people. And all my sins would skip that generation and beyond. But to all Bahamian women, we appreciate you and we love you. And feel badly for the times we have not lived up to our responsibility to be a true partner in this nation building exercise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the member for Cat Island has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the name of my family, friends, and constituents in Cat Island, San Salvador, and Rumkey. And like many Bahamians, most Bahamians across the country, they are challenged by these difficult times. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge, as was mentioned by the member from Agro City, even though he may not have said it specifically, that prayers do work and they are answered. Just be patient. I also take this opportunity to lend my voice to those who would have congratulated the women of the Bahamas, upon whose shoulders us men continue to stand. The women were the brave warriors, truly the brave warriors that truly blazed the path to majority rule. And I remember my family members in Cat Island, Adeline and Bristol, at Virginia Roll and Manita Roll, all who were incarcerated by the then oligarchs, because it was said that they were on land that did not belong to them. And so I take my hat off to the Bahamian women. My mother, of course, I don't know where I would have been had it not been for her, because I recall one fateful day in August of 1968 when I had to hide behind a gown tail, as we call it, because my father wanted me to go to government high to do A-levels. And she was saying, boy, my son, he's working in the bank, and he's wearing coat, suit, and tie in their canoe. And she was on Paradise Island. She was on Paradise Island with her fellow maids and bragging about this. And she spared me from going to do my A-levels because my father had thoughts of my vision of me going to London to do medicine. But look where I am. That moment, a disappointment in him, appointment in my mother, and it all. So I salute my mother, and my father didn't speak to me for quite a while, but all ended up well. And so, Speaker, I start off by pointing out that my constituents and their fellow Bahamians deserve the truth. They deserve the truth about the economic crisis. And they deserve a plan to lead us out of this crisis. The mid-year budget presentation was an opportunity for the Prime Minister, the country's new Minister of Finance, to address the seriousness of this moment and to propose a path forward. But unfortunately, this government never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. The country needs a plan. The government has not offered one. Instead, we have been treated to a series of boasts about funds already spent. This thing money spent is no substitute for a plan. Boasting offers no hope to the man or woman who sees no near-term prospect for work. The endless, tedious self-congratulations offer no comfort to the family worried about losing their home next month. Mr. Speaker, I don't make it a habit of giving my colleagues who sit opposite political advice, but I do urge them to step out of their fancy cars and talk to the Bahamian people. Yeah. They will find that there's no tolerance at this time for their political games. They will find that fear and despair are widespread. I cannot put it more plainly than this. The Bahamian middle class is disappearing. Thousands and thousands of our families have fallen into poverty, and thousands more are weeks or months away from the same plight. Mr. Speaker, what will happen next? The country deserves an answer. The government has not provided one. A missed opportunity. Reviewing the price of the government's 10-year bond, all the indications are that we are facing a crisis much bigger than we are told, much bigger than we are being told. Compared to other countries, for the same 10-year duration, we are trading 500 basis points higher. And high is indicative of the investors' concern about our ability to continue to borrow and finance our foreign debt. The market is pricing our debt with the expectation that the IMF will have to reschedule our debt going forward. It seems that the market is clearly expecting that the Bahamas will be next up for an IMF program. Mr. Speaker, it didn't have to be like this. Hurricane Dorian and COVID and the COVID pandemic have no doubt undeniably battered our country. But the government's mismanagement of both crises has made a bad situation so much worse than it had to be. In fact, the government's mismanagement of the economy stretches back before Dorian, before COVID. Think about it. In 2017, Bahama, despite the naysayers, had opened successfully, and the US economy was booming. Against that backdrop, and after a campaign promising it would be the people's time, the government raised back 60%, choking off consumer spending and slowing down the Bahamian economy. The government has also managed to engage a record levels of borrowing to the tune of some $2 billion per year without a single new school or hospital or clinic or major road to show for all that borrowing. The world took notice of the terrible damage caused by Dorian. The world took notice of the terrible damage caused by Dorian and responded with donations and help. Yet, who could visit Abaco or Grand Bahama today and believe that those funds were wisely and transparently spent to repair homes and community? Who could? The government has sunk some $200 million into a rundown hotel in Grand Bahama, forgetting even to include the furniture and the golf course in the deal.
How much is that? How much money?
Right? For decades, governments formed 200 million, yes. For decades, governments formed by both parties. For decades, I repeat this, for decades, governments formed by both parties decided against taking on the risks associated with government ownership in hotel properties. This government felt they knew better, and the Bahamian taxpayer is now paying the bill. We cannot afford mistakes like these. We cannot afford millions spent on failed prosecutions against former members of a PLP government, just as we cannot afford the toxic and destructive politics those prosecutions represented with their attempts to invent evidence and ruin lives. We cannot afford $20 million on sidewalks when families do not have enough to eat. You know, at the start of this pandemic, my colleague, deputy leader, representative for the Exomus and Ragged Island, advised that the government borrow, remember, at the beginning of the global downturn, at better interest rates. But they paid him no mind. And again, the Bahamian taxpayer is on the hook for the government's mistake. They're now borrowing at over close to 9.2%, 9.25%, 600 million. Borrowed then, what you've been paying. Sometimes you have to listen. This government has failed to report. This government has failed to report more than $100 million in pandemic spending to Parliament. And the Bahamian people, right? They have not reported to the Parliament and the Bahamian people, doing nothing to increase the confidence of lenders, investors, or the public. See, when you fail to report on expenditures such as this, and recalling that Transparency International spoke to this, about the lack of reporting in times like these. It does not do anything, particularly in our circumstance, to increase the confidence of lenders or investors or the public, even to think about lending you money. Guess what? This government has lost not one, not two, not three, but 4 ministers from cabinet. Investigations are announced and then disappear from view. In fact, Mr. Speaker, hours after the most recent resignation from cabinet, the Prime Minister said that certain matters had been brought to his attention and were under investigation. Remember? Recall? Surprise, surprise. You surprised? He has refused to say more. This is not someone who believes he has to report to the Bahamian people. The ineptitude, the incompetence, the mistakes, the lack of transparency, the dirty politics, the contempt for the people, all of these hurt our country. We have been told by Kalani and Bamboo Town that other nations look to ours. This is something now. The member from Engleson touched on this in her contribution. Kalani and Bamboo Town boasting that other nations look to ours as an example of how to lead on COVID. You know, that is laughable. But Mr. Speaker, you know, my brother, it would be if the truth weren't so tragic. In fact, the World Health Organization data show that our government has done decidedly worse than many countries in our region. Now, you all chart and all that, right? This is from the World Health Organization, right? This is from the World Health Organization. This here, this deals. I see red on the board. This deals. Red on the board. Yeah. This deals with the cases that were reported in these countries, starting from St. Kitts and Nevis, Haiti, Grenada, Dominica, Trinidad and Tobago. All of this goes on down. See where we are? The Bahamas, right? Per capita. And this is the World Health Organization records, right? This is the World Health Organization chart, right? So for the total cases in the Bahamas as of the 9th of March, World Health Organization is listed as 8,641, which brings us to a per capita, per COVID cases for 100,000 to a number of 2,197, when the Caribbean average is 1,973. That is the cases related to the Bahamas as compared to the rest of the region. And this is what you're bragging about, right? Then you go and look at the debt. Look at the debts for 100,000. We're still far behind the rest of the Caribbean. I want to tell you, see, this is not a laughing matter. See, I'm talking about you all patting yourselves on the back, talking about other countries looking at us, and I'm showing you that other countries are doing much better than us. That's the point I'm making, right? And so, Mr. Speaker, in respect to debts, it's recorded as the Bahamas 183 debts to date, right? Per 100,000, Bahamas at 46.5. The Caribbean average is 24.8. So we are twice as bad as the region. So we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? What does that point to? All right, that was that point to. See, and as I said, Mr. Speaker, as measured by cases and deaths per 100,000 of population, the Bahamas did worse than Jamaica, worse than Barbados, worse than Trinidad and Tobago, worse than Haiti. Mr. Speaker, the real horror of these charts is what they represent. is what they represent, the harm to both lives and livelihoods. This government did not have a plan in place when our borders reopened last July. We warned repeatedly that they needed to have the kind of testing, tracing, and isolation resources and protocols in place that could stop any outbreaks before they raged out of control. But as we know, this government prefers reacting instead of planning ahead. And inevitably, their lack of preparation meant that a few cases turned into thousands and thousands. The result was a series of lockdowns and restrictive emergency measures that were an assault on our economy. Some local family-owned businesses that had thrived for decades through various ups and downs closed their doors for good. Some new businesses never had a chance to get off the ground in this era of lockdown. Visitors were warned to stay away. While resorts were opening across the Caribbean, the Bahamas was essentially closed. The damage has been extensive. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, although pandemic fatigue is widespread, the battle is not over. And more transmissible strains of COVID are now circulating across the globe, threatening progress. Vaccines are only part of the answer. We repeat our advice once more. Take steps now to avoid a third wave and more lockdown. Provide free testing to Bahamians and better masks for frontline workers. Strengthen isolation protocols in clinics and hospitals. End restrictions that have nothing to do with science. This virus spread via airborne transmission. The government should provide technical guidance so that Bahamians can improve ventilation and air quality in their homes, businesses, schools, and churches. So you see, Mr. Speaker, there are alternatives. There are alternatives to throwing one's hands up and dishonestly declaring that all troubles stem from Dorian and COVID. That is clearly not true. It is this government's mistakes, their misguided priorities, their failures to plan ahead that have deepened our crisis, leading us to this very dangerous moment. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people deserve to be told the truth, which is that if we stay on the present course, the country is moving towards having to apply for an IMF program loan. That is what the markets clearly expect. The way they are pricing our bonds reveals that they do not believe the government has a credible plan for the economy. An IMF loan would likely result in widespread job losses, deep cuts in social services support, the selling off of national assets at values and terms that are not in the national interest, and an austerity program of tax rises and salary cuts. We should do everything we can to avoid this dark future. And if we stabilize the public finances and make smarter and more transparent economic decisions, a different future is possible. Mr. Speaker, the November 2020 report from Standard & Poor's. Mr. Speaker, the November 2020 report from Standard & Poor's refers to a 2021 election in our country. Yeah, the Standard report said that. It seems as if the government is sharing information about election timing with rating agencies, information it has not yet shared with the Bahamian public. But let us hope that that is true, so that the nation can sooner choose a better path forward. Mr. Speaker, the PLP has released a comprehensive economic plan, a plan to provide immediate relief to the Bahamian people, to stabilize the nation's finances, and to kickstart our economy and create jobs. This plan to recover, to rebuild, and to revolutionize our economy is urgently needed. The government says such things cannot be done. They said such things cannot be done. But just because they cannot do it or they cannot achieve it, these goals, we can. These goals, we can. And the fact that they believe it's not achievable does not mean that they cannot be achieved. Mr. Speaker, I urge everyone to read our plan for themselves by going to our website, plpbahamas.org. The economic plan offers a set of innovative and achievable proposals which, taken together, offer the country a path to growth and shared prosperity. We are not timid to share it. We're not timid if the government decides to follow that path, right? And that is okay, right? Because we feel that where we are in this country today, right, all hands are needed on deck. And so we share this. Mr. Speaker, the vision in our economic plan is guided by the detailed and extensive research contained in the National Development Plan and Vision 2040, two landmark pieces of work which Bahamians from every walk of life and every political persuasion contributed to. It remains one of the foolish legacies of this government that on coming to office, they choose to ignore it simply because they hadn't created it. In other words, because it wasn't their work, they chucked it and put it in the dustbin. The National Development Plan informs the concrete, practical plans we have announced to diversify the economy into the orange, green, and blue economies. We set out specific proposals that invest in young Bahamians, make our country more resilient, and shift the Bahamas to a greater reliance on forms of cleaner, sustainable, renewable energy. Much of what we propose relies on a modern digital infrastructure in order to achieve it. And therefore, plans for that transformation are also included. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to talk with my aunt and uncle again, And I don't want to talk with anybody having gone somewhere and spent 2 minutes. And perhaps, Mr. Speaker, you could ask those around me who have just come from that place to keep their mouths shut. Right? Mr. Speaker, there is an urgent need. There is an urgent need to focus on growing the revenue and creating jobs, making our system of taxation fairer, transforming our ways of generating and transmitting energy to make energy in the Bahamas more reliable, more affordable, and more sustainable. And finally, a need to focus on lowering the cost of living and improving the ease of doing business. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, in its Article 4 report, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, advised the government to continue strengthening, see the words used, to continue strengthening the fiscal revenue. They noted in that report, and I quote, revenue administration reforms since 2015 are commendable and should support the fiscal consolidation. So in 2017, the government, incoming government, was advised to follow that which they met in place. That's right. Revenue reforms introduced under the PLP administration in 2015 were commendable and commended to the government. Mr. Speaker, this government ignored both pieces of advice that was contained in that report, which has helped to contribute to the present crisis. They immediately slashed revenue by granting the infamous tax cuts to their wealthy friends and political insiders. Yes, businesses generating $50 million and more, you remember? Businesses generating $50 million and more per annum in gross revenue got a tax break. You remember that? How many Bahamians benefited from that? Users, you remember this one? users of industrial machines, washing machines and dryers, they got a tax break. Is that so, Peter? It was okay. I think
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
For all, because the opposition seemed to make sport of this. Let's deal with washers and dryers. In 2015, on the 1st of January, the PLP government introduced the value-added tax. And at that time, they reduced the duty on washers under 25 pounds from 40% down to 5%. Your government did that. Okay, your government did that. Okay, your government did that. Now, when we came to it, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point, Cat Island. When I finish the point, then I'll sit down. And then what y'all did, then when we came to office, we won the election on the 10th. We took office on the 15th. At least I took my portfolio on the 15th. And then the budget dropped on the 27th. So the budget was there. And embedded in that budget, deep down in that budget, was a reduction on duty on the parts for these machines that you reduced the duty from 40% down to 5%. The parts, not the machines, the parts. Okay? So now you got the small machines. These are the domestic machines. The machines that go into people's homes. That's what you was helping. The big commercial machines, the big commercial machines that are in a company called Superwash, the 30-pound machines and the 40-pound machines, they still at 40%, ain't nothing changed. These are the small machines. You was helping the small man. The domestic machine in their house, under 20 pounds. You reduced it from 40% down to 5%, not me.
Mr. Speaker, I start off by saying, I said that...
Honorable members.
I said that...
Honorable members.
Speaker, I hear Freetown, and he continues to confirm the fact that we do look out for the small man.
He has to confirm that.
And so, Speaker, I didn't say that, but sometimes I said, Speaker, I said. So anyhow, this government, the budget that was passed in 2017 was brought by that government, right? And that's what I'm saying. They brought that government, okay? And reductions were made on those, right? And so, Mr. Speaker, right? Well, what about the helicopter and aircraft owners? They got a tax break. Helicopter and aircraft owners got a tax break.
Honorable member for Cat Island.
High-end property owners.
Honorable member for Cat Island. The member for Yamakro is on a point of order.
The member for Cat Island. That was for him.
Honorable members, the member for Yamakro is on a point of order.
I wouldn't say deceptive. It's being deliberately misleading. You know, this issue came up with about helicopters and other things before. And there was nothing in that report that said that. And I put him to strict proof to produce it. He knows better. He needs to talk about South Andres. And how he's martyred that man.
What I'm saying is that they eliminated that helicopter aircraft owners got a tax break. And that was true. That was true. Right.
The chair recognizes honorable member for Cat Island. The chair recognizes honorable member.
While you are correct, Cat Island.
Freetown.
Oh, sorry.
The chair recognizes honorable member for Freetown.
Oh, sorry. I got a little exuberant, Mr. Speaker, and for that I apologize. I get a little exuberant. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important to note, and I wish the member would say this, that while we may have given that exemption, it's important to note what revenue did the central government derive from charging that rate on aircraft? None. Nothing ever came in. Nothing. Zero.
So if you reduce the duty from whatever it is down to zero, and you still getting nothing, nothing on that is nothing. That's why I'm talking there.
But you know, Mr. Speaker, you know, so that was a gimmick then. You're engaged in gimmickry. Yeah, but you said it's gimmickry. No, so it's gimmickry. Well, why touch it? If they're getting zero, why touch it? If you were not getting anything from taxes on helicopter aircraft, why touch it? Why touch it? The Speaker, when high-end property owners wrote the Prime Minister objecting to their property tax increase, the very next day, he reversed it. He reversed it. The former Minister of Finance, who had to resign after becoming embroiled in a suit involving fraud and false accounting to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, right? Before his resignation, he unceremoniously shut down the Revenue Enhancement Unit, which at that time was bringing in $30 million per month to the public treasury. The revenue subsequently fell to less than $5 million per month, and hundreds of millions of dollars lost as a result.
Honorable Member for Cat Island.
So,
The honorable member for Cat Island. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Wood on a point of order.
I seldom stand on a point of order, but this aggravates me to my soul. Especially when we have a former deputy. Point of order is the former deputy prime minister is mischaracterizing something that he himself could not stand the scrutiny of. I challenge Cat Island to answer the question of how he ever been held in contempt of court by clients for misappropriating funds, and how he ever asked the court to even seal documents to protect his political interests. Because the member for Bahama who resigned did the honorable
Member,
and I doubt
honorable
that
member
do that.
for Pine Wood, honorable member on Cat Island,
Answer that.
honorable member, both of you,
Reasonable. Do what to others.
both of you now, honorable member for Pine Wood, honorable member for Pine Wood and Cat Island, we must respect any matters that have been before the court or are still before the court. We're not permitted to comment on them in this house. Okay? So, both of those statements with respect to matters before the court were inappropriate.
no, Mr. Speaker, no.
Honorable member for Cat Island.
Just like that, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member. He went a little further, but you also made a statement that was inappropriate. You see, I want to nip it in the bud before I go any further. I allowed the first statement.
A privilege. He is breaching my privilege, and I need the member. I need to stop the clock, man. Mr. Speaker, I wish to raise this matter as a matter of privilege immediately, right? So this member could produce what he claims to be the case, right? I want that to happen, right? Google it. Right, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, no. Ask me no question. The question was asked. Speaker. First of all, I was never held in contempt of any court. Never.
Honorable member for Pine Wood.
Never.
I want to hear
held in contempt.
The member for honorable members. The member for Cat Island is raising a point of privilege. I need to hear the point.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker. I was on a point of privilege. I want the comments of the member to be put to the Committee on Privilege. The member accuses me of.
I asked you a question.
He accuses me, one, of having been held in contempt of court. Two, and that I had been involved in some embezzlement of client funds. First of all, I've never been held in contempt of any court. One. Secondly, I've never been accused of embezzling any client's funds. And I can say, unlike some who are presently in this chambers, I won't go that far.
Honorable
Right, so
member.
Mr. Speaker, so I want
Honorable member for Pine Ridge. I mean, Pine Wood.
Can I say that?
Honorable member for Cat Island, are you finished?
Speaker,
With
Speaker, I want this matter to go to committee on record, the committee on privilege, and then I will and the matter can be dealt with there. If you just make a ruling on that.
honorable member for Cat Island has made a request that his privilege has been breached with respect to
I could ask him a question.
the question. Hold on, honorable member for Cat Island. The question that was raised by the member for Pine Wood was framed. Honorable member for Cat Island, are you waiting for the chair to rule? The chair is satisfied that the question was framed in such a way as to impute the character of the member for Cat Island, Ram Kingston, Salvador. So the chair is of the view that that matter should be sent to the committee on privilege and honorable members. And while I'm on the subject, with respect to the issue raised about the honorable members, the chair is speaking. While we're dealing with this matter, the chair is expunging from the record the reference made to the matter that is before the court right now with respect to the member for East Grand Bahama. The comment by the member for Cat Island, Ram Kingston, Salvador, with respect to the substantive matter that is before the court, is hereby expunged. And honorable members, the matter has been, honorable member for Pine Wood, the matter has been sent to the Committee of Privilege when the matter is heard. At that time, if we can produce any evidence to that effect, then the matter will be dealt with at that time. But for now, the matter has been sent to the Committee on Privilege.
I wonder if you could order that the Hansard of what was said by him could be sent to me, please.
Don't get off on it.
If you may.
None of us should be down this road.
Okay?
Right there?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
So you want to celebrate, but you don't want to do that.
I thought they looked good.
Speaker, as I indicated, the former Minister of Finance, he shut down the Revenue Enhancement Unit, which was collecting $30 million per month to the public treasury. That's what he did. And the revenue subsequently fell to less than $5 million per month and hundreds of millions of dollars lost as a result.
Factual.
I spoke earlier of costly mistakes made by this government. Yet again, here is another mistake that cost our treasury hundreds of millions, one that they cannot blame on during or COVID. When a government makes mistakes of this magnitude, nations do end up in crisis. By contrast, our economic plan will ensure that high-end and commercial properties pay their fair share of taxes in the same way that ordinary householders are required to. But we also recognize the need to grow and expand revenue if we are to be able to both satisfy our debts and pay for the infrastructure and services Bahamians expect from their government. We will secure carbon credit payments for our natural resources. We will collect revenue from international overflights, which my honorable colleague, the member for Engliston, negotiated for our country. We will invest in the necessary infrastructure to ensure that substantial revenues flow from the orange, green, and blue economy. This includes providing exciting new opportunities in education and training. These sectors will only thrive if government policies create the structures where capital, people, ideas, markets, and consumers can come together. Speaker, let me turn to the issue of fairer taxation. It is a shame that the government's knee-jerk reaction to our economic plan was to criticize our proposal to cut VAT to 10%. It can't be done, this government says. Mr. Speaker, as of today, March 10th, 2021, dozens of nations around the world, as many as 90 nations, have offered relief from VAT and other sales tax to support their people and businesses through the current global economic crisis. I urge the government to learn more about how so many other nations, as many as 90, have found the wisdom to do this. One source is www.avalara.com. Another is KPMG. Just look them up and you'll see. The countries using tax reductions to stimulate the economies include the United Kingdom, Jamaica, Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, Nigeria, Brazil, and on and on. All of these countries have suffered shocks to their economies such as we have. And all of them see the wisdom of using a reduction in consumption taxes as a way of stimulating their economies and bringing immediate relief to their people. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, this reduction in VAT in our economic plan was not offered as a standalone proposal. As I have said, Bahamians will see that we also propose a significant number of revenue-enhancing measures. VAT is not the only tax-raising mechanism available to the government, but it is one that disproportionately affects ordinary Bahamians. Consumption taxes, such as VAT, rely on consumer spending in order to generate tax revenue. When the government imposed the shock increase in VAT by 60% in 2018, consumers cut back on their spending.
Honorable members.
Since then, the government has failed to meet a single one of its revenue projections. This is what happens when you don't understand basic economics. If you set consumption taxes too high, the economy slows down. These are the facts. This is the economic reality. The government argues that this modest decrease in VAT will lead to a reduction in revenue for the government. They are wrong. In fact, there will be an overall increase in revenue. Again, back to basic economic principles. The lower the price, the higher the demand. Lowering prices drive an increase in economic activity. But once again, Mr. Speaker, our proposal to cut VAT sits within a framework of broader revenue-raising initiatives and a commitment to review the tax regime to ensure that it is fair to all. Mr. Speaker, I want to focus specifically on energy for a moment. Members opposite will want to pay very close attention to what I have to say about this, as many of them, or some of them, may be impacted by what I have to say. The cost of energy in our country is extremely high. It is one of the main factors pushing up the high cost of living, and also one of the biggest obstacles to the ease of doing business. Under our economic plan, we will recommit the Bahamas to a minimum reliance on renewable energy of 30% by 2030.
Yeah.
We will create opportunities and incentives for entrepreneurs in renewable energy sources, especially solar. We will also implement reverse metering to reduce BPL consumption and incentivize solar energy use via tax incentives. In the last administration, an energy committee was established, comprised of business owners and members of civil society. This energy committee agreed to an energy plan. Before that plan could be implemented, the government changed hands. The committee met with the Prime Minister and requested that he implement that plan. He did not do so. There followed chaos at the board level. We assumed over this issue, and a large number of board members were either fired or resigned. The Prime Minister promised to conduct an investigation into what transpired, and nearly 3 years later, he has not. That this broken promise surprises no one does not make it less serious. There has been one bad decision after another at BPL, and it has cost the Bahamian people dearly. There is no accountability. There is no transparency. The rate reduction bond will add more to our electricity bill, and there appears to be no plan to reduce the cost of electricity to absorb that. In short, something smells fishy at BPL. Something smells fishy at BPL. In this rate reduction bond,
Honorable members.
Is this rate reduction bond designed in a way that will benefit investors at the expense of the Bahamian people? Unless the government comes clean, when we come into office, we will order a full-scale inquiry, sending for papers and persons, both nationally and internationally, and conduct the proceedings live on national television so the Bahamian people can see for themselves any mismanagement and any corruption. I remind the House that the only time a government official or board member has been convicted for corruption was a former member of the same institution. Something smells fishy at BPL, Mr. Speaker, and people are talking. Our country cannot develop in the way that it needs to without securing cost-efficient, sustainable energy. We will not allow all our future.
Honorable members.
We will not allow all of our future to be shackled by incompetence, greed, or corruption. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the government had an opportunity with this midterm budget to articulate a plan for the way forward. They have failed to do so. We look forward to much engagement with the Bahamian people over our economic plan. Mr. Speaker, I stand today in the name of the wonderful people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. Much is rightly expected of those of us who have the privilege to serve here. We must do all that we can to honor that expectation, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
I know.
Honorable member for Yamakro.
$3 million plan last.
Honorable members.
$3 million plan.
Honorable member for North Lutra. Honorable member for North Lutra. Honorable member for North. Honorable member for North Lutra. I am tolerating a lot of shouting across the floor, which is most improper and unparliamentary. And it shouldn't really be done because you're disrespecting the chair as well as the member who has the floor. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I simply request the Honorable Speaker's guidance that statements, and I know that the matter is already being sent to a committee that was made by Pinewood, just without giving the Honorable Member an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to at least, if he had information that could verify what he said, that but Mr. Speaker,
Honorable
I
member,
didn't hear anything about clients.
honorable member.
But the nature of what he said was said in public by in terms of a sealing of a case by a former distinguished member of this House, Right Honorable Distinguished Ingram, in public.
Honorable member for Yamakro. I've already ruled on this matter, and I've also been provided with the information that the member for Pinewood made reference to. And the matter appears, from what has been presented to me, to be allegations made, and it is referencing a court case without giving the conclusion of the case. So, out of an abundance of caution, I cannot permit any further discussion on that matter because I do not know what the result of the case is
No,
until that matter comes before the committee and you could produce
I know, Mr.
the result of the case. Then I will not permit any further discussion on it.
I agree, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, in terms of the procedure, in terms of giving them an opportunity, in terms of giving them an opportunity to put, I know on previous occasions, persons have been given the opportunity to get something and come back to the Honorable Speaker, but please, why didn't talk about Cat Island and the development in Cat Island, the airport and all those things, huh? Why didn't talk about all those things? No docks, no roads, no nothing.
Honorable members, I understand the point you're making,
Yes.
but the position of the chair is unchanged. The position of the chair is the matter, not certain whether the matter has been conclusively decided by the court. The information presented to me indicates that allegations were made and a case was filed. I have no conclusive or no conclusion or decision of the court on the matter, which could mean that the matter has not been decided. I don't know if it was withdrawn. So out of an abundance of caution, the matter has been sent to the Committee on Privilege. By that time, any evidence on whether or not the matter has been concluded by the courts could be produced to the Committee on Privilege, and the committee then will report to the House. As many? Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Abaco. Not Abaco, just a moment. Honorable member. Honorable member.
It has to do with the
Honorable member.
Recognizes the honorable member for North Africa. That's what he did.
We are. If the member for North Abaco is prepared to yield, I'll hear from the member for Cat Island.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm not prepared to yield. The member? No. Yeah. You know Anglican? You know Anglican ordinarily I would do the Christian thing and yield. But today,
honorable members,
I stand in this place on behalf of the indefatigable people of North Abaco, and I'm not prepared to yield. You know,
honorable member for North Abaco,
yes, Mr. Speaker.
you have the floor.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, it's amazing to me that the leader of the opposition, before I launch into my discourse here, would stand in this place and not even recognize the service of my beloved brother. He always tells me don't get in big people business. But I can't help this one today. Did not even acknowledge the honorable member for South and Central Agro.
He's still shocked.
Did not say one word.
He's still shocked. I know.
Mr. Speaker, through you, did not say one word.
He's still shocked.
The man who stands there.
Concerning his
concerning that member's sacrifice and service. To the first recognized political party in this country who represented the people of South and Central Andres as best as he could with the hand that he was dealt. In the last 3 terms, I believe you've been in this place. 3 consecutive terms. What not even say, I don't know what the problem is, right? I don't know what the challenge might be for him, but I know him to be a bigger man than that.
I don't know him.
To a man who stood by him and stood up for him when others sought to destroy him. And you know, Mr. Speaker, being a man who represents a family island, like the leader of the opposition, and I watched his recent video with much interest, running around on Cat Island barefoot.
Oh my God.
Doing the farming thing as we do on the island. How could you treat a fellow island boy like that?
No. Oh.
How could you unceremoniously disregard an island boy who come from South Andres? Humble beginning, like many of us can attest to, and not even mention a simple thank you.
Go on.
Listen, man.
Go on.
I know you don't like this because you don't want to be in the political thing like that. And you are a big man.
That's right.
You did the right thing
Honorable.
by bowing out gracefully.
Yes,
But listen, on behalf of the people of North Abaco whom I represent, and I grew up in Andres a little bit, you know. That's why I could tell you but catching crab and stuff. I thank you as a fellow island boy. As a fellow island boy, for your services to your people in South Andres, South and Central Andres. See, we ain't come from much, you know.
Papa would say that one.
We didn't come from that political oligarchy
Papa would say that
like the rest of them,
one
right? And so they feel they can unceremoniously wipe us off
That's right.
the face of the earth.
That's right.
But the old people saying, you know the word, eh?
Please, nobody.
There's a God who sits high
That's right.
and he looks low. And he yet governs in the affairs of men.
You ain't have room to write that.
Hold on to your faith. Hold on to your faith. And you know, pretty soon, you and I could go to Grand Key and go fishing. As friends ought to do. You're my friend, man. Man, every family island boy should be upset in this place today. Every family island boy. Every family island. You know, Mr. Speaker, the side opposite always talks about how we increase VAT from 60%. You know, before they introduced the VAT tax, there was never any in the Bahamas, you know. It was zero.
0 to 7.5.
So by saying that and repeating it, I can stand here and say that side opposite put 100% of that on the Bahamian people.
750%.
750%.
750%.
There's a Cornell graduate. I can listen to him.
60 versus 750. 750.
And you know, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the same rationale which inspired them to do it was the same one that inspired us to do what we had to do. And they know that. And so it's been very disingenuous to come in this place and say that we put 60% tax, VAT tax on the Bahamian people. And it's unfair.
They put 750.
And they know what condition they left us in.
And all them bills they had to pay.
Huh?
400 million.
350, 400 million of unknown debt. that we had to address.
All them bills be fine.
I really didn't come here for this today, you know. I really didn't come here for this today. And then they talk about hurricanes. All right. I did the research on this, you know. And in 2015, we had walk-in, right? Which struck the southern Bahamas. Matthew came in 2016. And you know,
When we came in 2017.
you know, we were in Atlanta whilst Irma was approaching in 2017, in September of 2017. And when we came back, you know, the hurricane preparedness people were summoned to the cabinet, and we asked them. I asked them the question personally. I said, you know, in these hurricanes here, I think we borrowed in excess of $150 million to address. I said it in my head, I'm to be corrected, to address Hurricane Matthew, $150 million. And I asked the question, how many homes do we have to be concerned about in Andros, North Andros, in Grand Bahama, that have not yet been addressed, that still have tar? They, you know, my fishing buddy, Renzel Rule from Black Point would tell me a number that no man could number. That's the way that he answers that. And then you come in here and assail this government for seeking to address the greatest Atlantic storm in the history of recording Atlantic storms in the Bahamas. Old people say, man, when you're pot black, you can't talk to the kettle. We live in very trying times. Extremely trying times. But let me begin by saying, Mr. Speaker, that I stand on no strength of my own, but on the strength of the Lord who gives us all strength. The Lord who gives us all strength. And North Abaco, Mr. Speaker, right out the gate, let me tell you that we fully support this resolution to approve the midterm fiscal statement. But please permit me to begin by extending heartfelt condolences on behalf of myself and my family and the people of Abaco, the entire Abaco, to the families of Kevin Murray, his wife Penny, and their children, and Calvin Edgecombe, his parents, Willa Mae and Calvin Edgecombe, literally my brother-in-law. And on the passing of Farron Lightbourne, I spoke to his father, John Lightbourne, this morning, who resides in Cooperstown, and their families, on the loss that they have to now go through. Our prayers and thoughts are with you. I know that Willa Mae was set to travel home today from, I think she's coming through Atlanta with the remains of her son, cremated, to be laid to rest home in Abaco. And so I ask that we all continue to pray for these families. And I already said this, but I have it in my notes. My friend, the Honorable Picewell Soka Forbes. I have it in my notes. I can say this. That's why it hurt me so. What they do to you. And then, but you notice who put his hand on your shoulder and walk over with you? I watch it, you know. I don't say much, but I observe a lot of stuff. A man from Pine Ridge. Then that man from Pine Ridge got up in here the other day and he said, "I'm coming for all now." I say, thank you, Jesus. Let him fire scatter shots. Move the rifle from over here alone. He firing buckshot now. And he says, none are safe. Mr. Speaker, none are safe. I say publicly, as I have said to you privately, I will always be here for you.
Absolutely.
I wish the best possible future to you and your family, my friend. You are a brother and a fellow island boy of whom I am very proud.
Absolutely.
You have done your best with the hand that you were dealt.
That's the
You did well, my brother. Keep your head up. Keep your head up. Now, Mr. Speaker, on a more personal note, outside of my very close associates and family members, not many people know that I went through a very, very difficult period following the onslaught of Dorian. Very, very difficult time personally. It was rough to sit there for 3 days without sleep and wondering if your family, your friends and loved ones and constituents were alive or dead. It took a tremendous toll on me, as I think it did many of us in Agro. And so the post-traumatic experience that I went through, and I believe at some time you still go through it, we all still go through it in Agro, from Agro and Grand Bahama, it was real. But during this period of my life, my friend, Bransel Rose, the honorable member from Garden Hills, who has opted not to contest that seat in the upcoming general elections, he never left my side. You know, the Bible says that a friend sticketh closer than a brother. And I needed him to be a friend and a brother in that moment, and he recognized it. You know, he took me fishing, even though he claimed that it was for me, but I believe that most of the fishing was for him.
You go on the fishing to the damage.
And he encouraged me. And he did a lot to settle me. He is my friend. He's become a political mentor, an advisor, and I will miss him very much when he leaves this place. But he knows that I will continue to seek his advice from time to time. He's a good Black Point fella. I see you shaking your head, Sir Andrew. He's a good Black Point fella. I want to also take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to wish well to my former colleague in the cabinet, Lanisha Roll, as she pursues whatever she does in the future. She's also my friend. We went through law school together, and I wish her well. And finally, Mr. Speaker, today represents, it marks the birthday of my last. You know, they say the last button on Jacob's coat. Today he turned 24. Don't box that now. I don't want nobody boxing that. And if you do, you pay. Right? His name is Drayon Alexander Henfield. He's a young police officer. I call him my cross. But I want to say to him, happy birthday. Your mom and I are very proud of the three of you. And we thank God every day for the blessings that you represent in our lives. Now, Mr. Speaker, to the task at hand. Our setback as Alberconians is but a temporary dislocation of our journey to once again reclaiming our most pivotal space and place in the economic fabric of the Bahamas. We know that between Alberco and Grand Bahama, Dorian, in one fell swoop, eliminated between 18 and 20% of our economy, the Bahamian economy. And I want to congratulate the member for Marco City, who I thought could speak for me any day, because he spoke those things, and I know Pine Ridge also reconciled with what he said. He spoke those things that truly represents where we are in our recovery in Alberco and Grand Bahama. For us, it's not about in this season going door to door and politicking. It's about asking our people, how can I help to make you whole one at a time? How can I help to get you back to where you once were? And so, Mr. Speaker, this minister-led government will not stop and cannot stop until we have completely restored the Bahamian economy post-Dorian and now COVID. Mr. Speaker, before addressing my constituency and the ministry for which I have carriage, please permit me to put a couple of things into perspective, at least from my point of view. There was no playbook written to address Dorian, which walked ashore on the 1st of September in Central Abaco and the Keys. And just 6 months later came COVID. But there was no playbook. People can, growing up, I love to watch football. I always loved Montana the Rice, right? That's Joe Montana, San Francisco 49ers, and Jerry Rice. Montana the Rice, right? But you could always second guess the play of the quarterback on Monday morning after you spend Sunday watching the football game. And you'd always say, why did the coach call that play? But there was no playbook to call for Dorian. Dorian was the worst of its kind in the history of Atlantic storms ever recorded in this region. It sat on Abaco and Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, for 3 days. People would want you to forget that. It sat there for 3 days and left in its wake in Abaco alone more than $3 billion in damages to private, public, and commercial infrastructure. $3 billion. Completely destroyed and decimated Central Abaco. It was unbelievable when we walked out of the government complex, where we had shelter and safety, to see the surroundings of what Dorian had done to Central Abaco. Unbelievable. The level of destruction. You know, Mr. Speaker, I traveled to Abaco not long after Dorian with the Secretary General of the UN, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and the Secretary General of the OAS. And each of them said to a man and a woman that this is the worst catastrophic event I have ever seen. And now bear in mind, these are people who travel all over the world looking at disaster sites. This is the worst that I have ever seen. But I got courage from something Antonio Guterres said to me, the Secretary General of the UN. He looked at me and he said, Darren, this is bad. He said, but there's one thing that I can tell you about the Bahamas. You have capacity. And that meant to me that we had the ability to recover and to build back stronger and better and even more resilient than what Dorian did to us in the past. And that gave me hope and courage. No one government anywhere in the world, Mr. Speaker, no matter its size or capacity, could respond to Dorian and now COVID without the support of our friends. None. The COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Speaker, also had no playbook. You know, at some point, people were here saying, open the bars. Let people travel. No lockdowns. Well, Mr. Speaker, our strategy was simple, you know. We still don't have the capacity to manage an onslaught on our hospitals and healthcare facilities of Dorian. And so we had to manage it through mitigation. And most Bahamians don't have the capacity to jump up and fly off somewhere and get treatment. Most Bahamians don't have that capacity. And so we following the science, taking the advice from the healthcare professionals. We have to try and control the spread of COVID in this country. And Mr. Speaker, we may not have done brilliantly at it, but we did well. We did well, Mr. Speaker. And to hear people stand in this place and denigrate the work of our healthcare professionals by saying how this happened and that happened, that's not fair, man. That's not good leadership. I want to take this opportunity to thank the healthcare professionals and the police officers and the security services for all that they did. And the social workers, my friend never lets me forget that, from Southern Shores. Never lets me forget that. For doing all that they did and all that they continue to do in the face of this pandemic to help us to recover. Every government in the world has to find a way of balancing the economy and saving lives. Every government. And we are no different than anybody else. We are no different. You know, you look at the United Kingdom, you look at France, you look at Spain, you look all over the Caribbean. Countries have to do what they have to do, depending on the cooperation of their people, to bring us through this crisis in which we find ourselves. And this is a good place for me to say this, Mr. Speaker. Each of us have to play our role. The Bahamian public has its role to play. My fellow Abaconians, we have our role to play, and the government has its role to play. We got to social distance in Abaco. We got to wear our masks. We got to sanitize. We can't go inside of clubs and restaurants and gather in unknown numbers and then come out and jeopardize the entire island and go home to our grandparents and our mothers potentially carrying COVID. We got to do our part, and then the government has to do its part to keep people safe and to resuscitate the economy. That's our part. Here's what I read in a book I read recently by Fareed Zakaria. And the book is entitled 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World. You know, Fareed Zakaria is a journalist who's a commentator with a regular show on CNN. He comes on Sunday morning. I like to listen to him. And I like to read his work. And this is what he says, I quote, "It may well turn out that this tiny viral speck," talk about COVID, "will cause the greatest economic, political, and social damage to humankind since World War II." He went on to say this, Mr. Speaker, "In the case of the novel coronavirus, the impact is being shaped by the reality that the world is deeply interconnected, that most countries were unprepared for the pandemic, and that in its wake, many of them, including the world's richest nations, shut down their societies and economies in a manner unprecedented in human history." In other words, what Zakaria is saying is that it didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, big or small. All countries in the world moved to do what they could to protect the life of their citizenry and the rest of the world. And that's all we did in the Bahamas. That's all we continue to do in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, we've heard it said here before, but I believe it's worth repeating. In their 2020 Article 4 consultation with the Bahamas, in a press release dated the 26th of January, 2021, I believe we laid that in this place before, the executive board of the IMF indicated the following: "The COVID-19 pandemic has exacted significant human, social, and economic toll on the Bahamas. The archipelago was just starting to recover from the severe damage caused by Hurricane Dorian in the fall of 2019, when the global outbreak of COVID-19 led to a sudden stop in tourism, the main source of its income and employment. The authorities mounted a rapid emergency response to support the economy and vulnerable households and put in place strict containment measures. But amid limited testing and health resources, reopening of the economy has been challenging." They went on to say this: "Among other things, the report went on to note that the collapse in tourism has accounted for 50% of GDP and 70% of employment, was estimated to have large-scale socioeconomic effects, especially coupled with domestic containment measures." And simply put, all it says is this, is that the COVID-19 pandemic, and they would have you to believe otherwise, that it's something that the government did to cause the collapse of the economy. Our economy, as all Bahamians know, is largely dependent upon tourism. And you know, before COVID, Dorian was a bump in the road, but before COVID, I think we had numbers up to 7.2 million tourists coming to this country. You reckon? And they would have you to forget that. that 7.2 million tourists for the first time in the history of this country came to the Bahamas under this administration. They would have you forget that. I remember one Christmas I was home in Abaco and people were calling me and saying to me, listen, we don't have any rooms. And so people were sleeping on boats. I called them and told them about it, indicating that we need more rooms. I called Freetown. My brother who sits right here to my left. So, Mr. Speaker, many families associated with the tourism industry, coupled with those impacted by Dorian, have been forced to go through some very challenging times, tough times, over the past 18 months. Contrary to some dissenting views and voices that we hear all the time, especially during this debate, Mr. Speaker, it's all not loss and hopelessness. Our leaders got to give people hope, man. If you want people to listen and take you serious, you got to put right where right is. At least sometimes, or you can't just sit there and say everything was horrible and everything was bad and nothing worked and blame them, and then you come with a plan. There is no plan. You come with a plan, there is no plan. I sat here and I said, okay, maybe today, the leader of the opposition, who is the leader of the country in waiting, the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition would bring a plan, would bring a real plan. And I sat and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I listened at the end of the day and I was taking notes and I saw no plan. You talk about the 10% that you're gonna take back from what? But how you gonna fill that gap when there's no economy, no tourism?
They can do it breadbasket.
I mean, but we took every VAT off a breadbasket item, as I recall, and electricity, right? And then you tout to us what other countries have done, but you fail to say to the Bahamian people that these other countries have other forms of taxation, and other forms of revenue streams that they can go to. But I've heard it said they could correct me. I've heard it said that when they introduced VAT in the first instance, they wanted to go to 15 the whole time. 350. But they became a little skittish. They became a little, gun shy. That's what I heard. That's what I heard said.
Chamber of Commerce, tell them to bring it to 75 and no exemption.
And so when we say what the government has done, and trying to support our society and communities with aid and assistance through NIB and through social services and other revenue streams, we're not saying that to brag, but we have to account for the money. We have to say where the money is being spent. And then they say we bragging. But Mr. Speaker, it is unprecedented. It is unprecedented and unassailable.
You're telling them what we did. We ain't bragging.
That this government has put more money into social services and the support of the Bahamian people than ever before in the history of this country.
That's why the deficit is so big.
Mr. Speaker, there's good news, There's good news. Today, the Prime Minister and I and the Minister of Health and some others went to the airport and received from India 20,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines, otherwise known as Covishield, from the government of India. Huh?
I come in.
I can address that. If you just work with me, I can address that too. Because I feel a certain kind of way about that. I feel as a foreign minister, I feel a certain kind of way about that. And you prompt me to go there early. It is greatly unfair, right? Okay, let me just come back here and deal with India, because I really want to appreciate India here, right? And so, on behalf of the government and people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, as its foreign minister, I wish to express our heartfelt thanks, gratitude, and sincere appreciation to the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and the people of India for their leadership, for their solidarity, and for their support of not only the Bahamas, but of other CARICOM countries by making available to us these much needed and coveted vaccines. We, like other CARICOM countries that have benefited from India's charity in this regard, are extremely grateful, as the vaccines set us more firmly on the road to recovery and protecting the lives and economy of our people. I wish, Mr. Speaker, also to thank the United States of America for their commitment to transport these vaccines throughout our family of islands when that time comes. Mr. Speaker, let me hasten to add that vaccines won't be the silver bullet. We don't believe that they're going to solve all of our problems overnight. But it is hopeful that they will inspire sufficient confidence in the traveling public to cause our tourism industry to be fully revived and to flourish once more. Arguably, Mr. Speaker, the attention placed on the family islands by this minister-led administration is unprecedented in the modern era of governance in the Bahamas. You know, Mr. Speaker, Abaco is no exception. But before I leave there, let me just say, Mr. Speaker, that every country we speak with since March and the advent of COVID in the Bahamas, we have asked for aid and assistance in the way that these vaccines are distributed across the world. And we have recognized, Mr. Speaker, not to cast aspersions on any, that the wealthy countries of the world have accessed these vaccines and not allowed them to be equitably distributed to smaller countries like ours. And so that's why we applaud, Mr. Speaker, the leadership of countries that will consider yet developing small island states like us in the region and will consider to bless us in this fashion. And that can't be understated, Fine Rich. And that must be stated publicly. It must be stated. And so now, Mr. Speaker, the 2K, what 2K? You don't know how to work it. What you do is you pay. Oh, yeah, so the Minister of Health has spoken to this, the Prime Minister has spoken to this. We have set aside the money and given it. But we can't get it until the distributors send it. And there were many probably ahead in the queue with more money than us to get it. And so we are doing our best to source them, and we will continue to work on all fronts as this government has been able to do. All fronts. This is a cross-government effort. Cross-government effort. Every ministry of the government of the Bahamas that has anything to do with it is working as hard as we can to get that vaccine in this country, to get it into the arms of Bahamians as quickly as we can. As quickly as we can. Mr. Speaker, I absolutely agree with Marco City. There's no time to do politics as usual in places like Abaco and Grand Bahama. This is time to heal every hurt where you find them. And do all that you can, one family at a time, to make them whole again. Mr. Speaker, we in Abaco have come a mighty long way since the 1st of September 2019. But we still have a long way to go toward our full recovery and restoration of our homes and our businesses before we can once more reclaim the second largest touristic economy in the country. We could not and would not, Mr. Speaker, be where we are in our post-Dorian recovery and restoration efforts without the much needed help of our friends and neighbors. Simply put, the government of the Bahamas realized immediately that the complete recovery and restoration of Abaco and Grand Bahama could only be achieved through partnerships and the help from our neighbors and our friends. So, Mr. Speaker, in tandem with government apparatuses geared toward our recovery and restoration, various groups and entities who came in good numbers, from around the world gave us help and gave us much needed hope. That was and still is much needed, that hope, as we endeavor to build back our broken lives and our island better, stronger, and more resilient to face challenges of the future. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this time. There are so many of them, I can't begin to name them. I wish to take this time to formally thank them, all of those who came in from the international community, those who came in domestically from around this country, and those who volunteer every day, as we recognize the power of women in our societies. You know, Mr. Speaker, I go home to Abaco and sometimes I visit these feeding sites. And all I see are women putting together care packages to feed our people. And these women ought to be commended for the work that they do. And they don't look for pay. They don't look for reward. They don't even look for praise. All they want to do is the best that they can to help their fellow citizens to recover from COVID and from Dorian. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are without doubt grateful for the aid and assistance that we got from more than 1,000 NGOs that came into this country, came into Abaco and Grand Bahama to help us in the aftermath of Dorian. Thank God for them. Fine Rich, I thank God for them every day. I thank God for them every day. Many of these groups and entities and others teamed up with the DRE, the Disaster Authority and Reconstruction, and local government officials and churches and families and others to help us in our darkest hour of need. And many of them yet remain with us. Mr. Speaker, the residents of Abaco and the Keys, I am certain, are aware by now that the DRE, whose minister presented in this place very wonderfully yesterday, very wonderful. She did a great job, eh? Represented very well. Yeah, you trained her well. That the small home repairs program, which had halted its funding because of funding challenges, has now re-engaged. They've now re-engaged, and all that means is that if you've been assessed the damages in Abaco and Grand Bahama between 2,500 and 10,000, and you've not yet gotten all of that assessed damage and vouchers to the hardware where you need to go and get your voucher done, that means that you need to contact the DRE, right, Minister? That's yours. That's coming. That's coming. And so that you can recover and get your materials and continue with your effort of rebuilding your homes. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, as part of the government's recovery initiative to help us in Abaco to get back on our feet, over 310 homes have qualified to receive furniture and appliances through the Ministry of Social Services. These furnitures and appliances replacement program, Mr. Speaker, will go a long way in helping us to recover our lives in Abaco. You know, thus far, this program has touched in a truly meaningful way, Mr. Speaker, qualified families in Central Abaco, in North Abaco, and in South Abaco. Very shortly, I'm advised that it is hoped that we can work through the logistical challenges associated with the delivery of some 33 beds, 43 refrigerators, and 43 stoves assigned to support families in Grand Key. Roosevelt Curry, I want you to hear me with that. We're trying to get your stoves and your refrigerators and your beds to you as soon as possible so that you and Oliver and Maxwell can tell the people that we are on the way. These are coming. This is also a good place, Mr. Speaker, for me to thank Tigwin Hunt, Hasted, and Stephanie Heal, and their team in Treasure Keep for their beds and bed frames and pillows and blankets initiative, which was supported by the Abaco Strong and Rotary and Life at Key Foundation and City Furniture. Through this program, we are very pleased that this initiative supported and enabled the distribution of more than 200 beds another mentioned accoutrement, the families in mainland Abaco and in Green Turtle Key, and also another 40 of those beds will go to Grand Key as soon as we can work through these challenges of transportation. Mr. Speaker, you heard the Minister of Education say that all 14 public schools, with the exception of Treasure Key Primary, which was completely destroyed during the passage of Dorian, have been completely repaired or are currently under repair. Worthy of mention are the Amy Roberts Primary School in Green Turtle Key, which is undergoing a complete makeover at a total of approximately $1.7 million upon its completion. The project, I'm advised, is being funded by the Green Turtle Key Foundation and should be completed within the next 2 months. That's, I can get to that, but the government spent $3.7 million repairing that. That's a completely new campus. You need to go visit. I'll take you home with me. I'll take you home with me since you firing scattering bullet now, not just rifle. I'll take you home with me so you can see. I know, that's why I want you to go there and walk with me. Come go walk with me, right? It will also serve the Amy Roberts Primary School in Green Turtle Key, Mr. Speaker, will also double as a hurricane shelter. One thing we noticed, Mr. Speaker, was that the hurricane shelters that we use normally, the churches and the schools, we got to go away from that. We got to now begin to build fit-for-purpose hurricane shelters, because just about every hurricane shelter that we had described in Central Abaco were completely decimated and Dorian. And so people had to leave those places and make their way to other places. The government complex was an ark.
Yeah, thank God.
It was an ark in the midst of the storm. The government complex and the clinic, they were super. Central Abaco Primary, Cooperstown Primary, Pine Ridge Crossing Rock Primary, Great Gornick Key Primary, Mount of War Key Primary, and Morris Island All Age have all been repaired. Don't mind this, don't mind. Hello. They've all been repaired. But you know COVID and stuff is a challenge. You know that. Stop asking me trick questions now. I ain't talk.
School in Carolina.
Repairs to the Foxtown Primary, Mr. Speaker, I'm advised will be completed this week. I'm advised that those repairs will be completed this week.
They even named the schools after the ladies before.
Now, still under repair at various degree and stages. You want to take a break, Mr. Speaker?
No.
Huh?
No.
You're talking to Frank.
Oh. No. You're right there. I'm advised, Mr. Speaker, that the Foxtown Primary will be repaired this week, completely repaired, and the Grand Key All Age Primary, Cherokee Sound Primary, and Hopetown Primary, Mr. Speaker, will likewise. Now, Sherlin C. Boodle High and Patrick J. Bettle High have undergone quite extensive repairs and upgrades and are almost ready to receive our students. They're almost ready, Pine Ridge. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to assure my people that I will continue to work toward our full recovery. Thus far, we have been able to source, with tremendous support from our friends and at home and abroad, thousands of units, Pine Ridge of sheetrock, hundreds of portable generators, hundreds of beds and food and furniture vouchers, clothing and shoes and backpacks and book packages, among other things. No. These said didn't come from the NGOs. When I say we were able to source, that means me and some other people who helped us. Yeah, we. I don't want to say me. I don't want to say me because I can't do it. Just me. Yeah. And so we remain optimistic, Mr. Speaker, that more help will be realized in this regard very, very soon. Mr. Speaker, we are also pleased that with the help of the Ministry of Education, the National Association of Bahamians, led by Rosamond Gomez and based in Florida, Diane Holovesco and the Free National Movements, Women's Association and others, have been able to support our children with much needed devices, such as tablets and laptops, to aid in their virtual education process. And I believe we have touched basically every student in Abaco, in Central and North Abaco, And so if there are more that needs assistance, we still may be able to put our hand on a few more devices for the virtual learning that you need to have. In any event, the virtual learning is good for, the devices is good for them to have. Yeah, but you know, they have to do it under supervision. I'm also advised that a small allotment of tablets and laptops, Mr. Speaker, and backpacks and book packages was sent to Green Hill Key this week for some of our students there. Mr. Speaker, despite the disapproval that Bahamians and others at large have held over the years for the government utility corporations, Bahamas Power and Light, BPL, and the Water and Sewage Corporation, I wish on behalf of all Abaconians to express my gratitude to these entities within the ministerial portfolio of the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Member for Carmichael, who have done an exceptionally good job, I believe, in Abaco. BPL, Mr. Speaker, led on the ground by a fellow Abaconian in the person of Mr. Marvin Green, fellow from Mose Island, has managed to restore upwards of 98% of the power in Abaco and the Keys post-Dorian. 98% at a cost thus far of near $35 million. That's commendable, given the level of destruction inflicted by the storm upon our utility infrastructure. That's commendable. That's commendable. Water and Sewage continues to rebuild and upgrade its systems throughout the island. And since the storm to now, the corporation has shifted its focus from restoring disrupted water supplies to major reconstruction. The transformation, he's traveling to another island. He sent me a note. He's probably going to look to see where he could put some more pipes. He's probably doing that. The transformation to our water and sewage systems currently underway in Abaco and the Keys is being supported by the $15 million allocation contingent loan for natural disaster emergencies obtained by the government of the Bahamas from the IDB. We are pleased, Mr. Speaker, and very proud of the bridge currently under construction at a cost of $5.5 million, which will connect Little Abaco and Great Abaco. You know that bridge, Mr. Speaker, which joined Great Abaco and Little Abaco was completely destroyed by Dorian. And the bridge was built just ahead of the 2017 elections. Completely wiped out by Dorian to the point where we had to go back to the old days of using the little dinghies and boats to be able to transfer people and food and other things that we needed between Great Abaco and Little Abaco. But that's going to be a thing of the past, Mr. Speaker. This bridge, I am told, will allow the ecology to come back. You know, the water will flow from north to south, from the ocean side into the creek side, the bank side. And Mr. Speaker, it's a thing of beauty. You can go there with me too, Mr. Speaker. They had there before. So I can show you. We can put some lines in the boat, some lines in the water, and see what we can do. You know? I need him to go down. And you know, this bridge, Mr. Speaker, was temporarily repaired by the Dutch and some others. And it was because it was compacted quarry before the bridge went in. And now it's going to be a bridge of a height, I'm told, where boats can actually traverse from one side to the other. Yes, it's going to be a thing. I understand Eleuthera. That's South Eleuthera. North Eleuthera, I understand that the only bridge in this country that would be more fantastic is the glass window bridge that this government will put into Eleuthera.
You know what, you was to say the bridge in Russell Island or something like that, the one they just built.
No, everybody loves the glass window bridge. It's a thing of beauty. Where you can look at the Caribbean Sea on one side and the Atlantic Ocean on the next side. That's a place of historical cognizance and presence.
I don't see that on my phone.
We are very pleased, Mr. Speaker, for that bridge. The bridge, Mr. Speaker, as I said, will be tremendous for our people and it will connect Little Abaco and Great Abaco. You know, when you come down to even Grand Key will have the benefit of that bridge. Because you'll come into Crown Haven, Foxtown, and then you come into Mount Hope and Wood Key and Cedar Harbor, and you go all the way up into Cooperstown and Blackwood, and you know, you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to do that from that bridge, from Little Abaco into Great Abaco. That's a wonderful thing, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, this bridge will be state of the art. promise I won't be long. Mr. Speaker, we still have some challenges that we need to address. On some of them are in our docks, dock at Green Tail Key, on both sides, Green Tail Key proper on the main, that dock needs to be repaired. We are working assiduously to see how we can get that done with our help and someone who's volunteered to help us to do that. The dock on the Treasure Key side, which services the ferry terminal to go to Green Tail Key, that also needs to be addressed. The Crown Haven dock needs to be addressed because that's a very important ferry terminal. We've done the scope of work on that, and we're just waiting for that to be issued to the contractors who will do it. The south side dock, which is used by the Moores Island people when they come into the mainland, coming across Murphytown to come into Marsh Harbor, that needs to be repaired. We also are aware that road pavement and waste management at the site in Grand Key should also be done. You know, one of the only promises that I made, Mr. Speaker, I was very careful as an always politician to make promises, was that we would address the waste site and Green Tail Key, because when we came to office, what you had was people would just go there and burn the site, and you would have multi-million-dollar lots down at Green Tail Key Club, and all of a sudden a big blaze of fire would come up, and then that soot would travel in the wind and go on those yachts, and the owners, you know, being a little miffed, would just pick up and go. And so we recently, through the DRA, put out an RFP for a transfer station on Green Tail Key, which will allow us the same kind of transfer station that we see in Hopetown and other places like that, which will allow us to just collect that refuse from Green Tail Key after we will have cleaned up the site and remediate it, and just take it across to the mainland and take it into a proper landfill on the mainland. And I look forward to the day when we can open that site. Minister, I look forward to the day when we can open that site in Green Tail Key. You know, Mr. Speaker, I read somewhere that home ownership is the cornerstone of a strong community. Home ownership, Mr. Speaker, promotes responsible citizenship, responsible citizens, and promotes strong and responsible communities, and results in resilient countries. For this reason, among many others, our government, both in 2007 and 2012, and again in 2017, committed and recommitted to addressing the unmet demand for affordable housing in our country. As housing remains the singular greatest need in Abaco since the passage of Hurricane Dorian, I'm very motivated by our government's plan for community and housing developments, which are led by the Prime Minister in Central and South Abaco and here in New Providence. As part of this government's policy to make housing available to Bahamians, particularly young couples seeking to establish their families throughout our country, we are providing land which, in the current economic climate, would be very difficult for the best among us to otherwise obtain. We've recently heard the Prime Minister announce that multi-family lots in the West New Providence would be at a cost of $50,000, and the single family lots would be $40,000. And they would own these young people, Mr. Speaker, we hope young professionals would own these properties outright. He said, and I quote, "It's a way of creating wealth, and we start off with 150, and we've identified another plot of land also." He went on to say that our intention is to do this throughout the entire Bahamas, giving everybody an opportunity to own not only land, but their own homes. Mr. Speaker, you know, as a young married couple, one of the most important things for me and my wife was when we were able to secure a mortgage and build us a modest home for our family. And I believe a lot of young people in this country, you know, and I look at Mr. Flowers and them here, are in a similar position, where they just need an opportunity to be able to go and access land. And most families, that's the most important purchase that they will make in their lifetimes. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think it's commendable that this government would focus so heavily on being able to provide that opportunity to young families in this Bahamas, all across the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's a marvelous thing. And so toward this end, we have assigned, Mr. Speaker, thus far, 3 areas, 60 acres each, in Abaco to be used for such communities, community housing developments. These are, Mr. Speaker, in Wilson City, just outside of Spring City, traveling south, Wilson City, and then in Spring City, and then, Mr. Speaker, in Central Abaco in the Murphytown, Dundastown area, which will allow, through these housing developments, Mr. Speaker, young people, young families, and single mothers to access these properties and really have a place that they can call home from the surrounding areas of Dundastown and Central Pines and Murphytown and as far away as Treasure Key or Cooperstown. They can come and take advantage of this initiative. Mr. Speaker, I think it's a great idea. Mr. Speaker, let's just use Murphytown as an example for what we're trying to do here. What we intend to do throughout Abaco and the rest of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, is to, if the market value of a piece of land that we're looking at is valued at about 20,000, say in Murphytown, the government will put in the infrastructure. And of course, we're going to have to engage public-private partnerships to do this. The government will put in infrastructure, say the infrastructure costs about 5,000, right? Mr. Speaker, that means that young family will have immediately right out of the gate $15,000 of equity in that property. And so, Mr. Speaker, if peradventure the mortgage corporation or some other lending institution would say, bring your land paper to me and let us use your equity, that means they get the land free. Basically, that is what we're trying to do. That's what we're aiming for, Mr. Speaker, so that we can make these homes available to young Bahamian families who really, really deserves an opportunity. Those families that qualify to be able to engage in this initiative, Mr. Speaker. I think this is very commendable, and I look forward to it. I understand through the Minister of Housing that we are very close to that day when we can go and break that ground in Murphytown and Abaco. I know that we have already started. We've already broken ground in Central Pines, Mr. Speaker, for the 40-plus homes that we have been promised through Pastoral Development, I think out of Baker's Bay, that they will build these homes gratis for the Bahamian people in Abaco who've lost their homes. And I really appreciate, Mr. Speaker, I want to say this right here. I really appreciate as Member of Parliament for North Abaco, the Beck Group, and Fred Papal. Fred Papal is a Bahamian who lives in Houston, I think. Dallas, grew up right here in Nassau, Mr. Speaker, and has done well. He's the CEO of this Beck Group, and they donated, Mr. Speaker, a wonderful home earlier this year in Blackwood, a wonderful model of a home that was able to, the Prime Minister and I were able to go down there and participate in that handover ceremony. And Mr. Speaker, we need more people like this who would come and be able to assist families in the Bahamas, from abroad and locally, who might be able to do it, to help families to recover, because the government can't do it all on its own. Government can't do it all on its own. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Bahamas Fast Ferries, who made it possible to bring that house from Florida free of charge into Abaco and caused it to come down to that site and to be erected. It was a wonderful thing to see that family, a single mother, Mr. Speaker, with one challenged son, to be able to go into that house and call it her own, right in Blackwood, where my mother was born. I was very pleased and very proud to be a part of that, Mr. Speaker, that handover ceremony, and to be a part of trying to source that house as we did through the Beck Group. I'm also truly appreciative, Mr. Speaker, of the help we have received toward building homes, and we have done this with the help and support of others, Mr. Speaker. We've been able so far to build a home in Fire Road for a single mother and her 4 children now, because she just had a young baby. And we're very pleased, Mr. Speaker, that home is almost near completion. We're very proud of that. We're very proud of the fact that we're able to build a home with the help of others in Mount Hope. We're assisting another being built in Blackwood and under construction. Another one is under construction in Crown Haven. And Mr. Speaker, it is hoped, and I hope they're listening to me down there in Grand Key, it is hoped that we will begin construction on 2 more homes, this time in Grand Key. Hopefully before the end of next month, we will begin lay those foundations, Mr. Speaker, and to build those homes for those mothers that we have identified. Two of them are in Grand Key, and we're actively working on doing that. We remain very optimistic, Mr. Speaker, that more help is on the way to assist our recovery, and more in the need of making serious repairs to many of our homes. We're very optimistic, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to be able to impact and affect real change in this regard. I'm also very motivated by our government's efforts to get papers in the hands of the many people in North Africa that have been waiting for a long time now on their Crown grants, the Crown land grants. Just last Friday, I met with the people responsible for the project, and it's anticipated that we will begin very soon, as we have done in Crossing Rocks, the Prime Minister and I and others. James Albury, the member of Parliament, South and Central Abaco. It was very gratifying to be there and be able to put in the hands of these individuals their land paper. Mr. Speaker, land as well. Land as well, but we must, as a government, as part of our policy, we must find a way to get in the hands of Bahamians so that they can benefit. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for which I have responsibility and carriage. And the ministry, Mr. Speaker, continues to work judiciously to manage the budget allocations, and even more particularly the expenditures during these very challenging times in which we find ourselves. With that, Mr. Speaker, permit me to say that I am blessed to be serving alongside a group of Bahamians who will stop at no end to achieve the best outcome for our beloved Bahamas and the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, despite the twin catastrophic calamities of Dorian and COVID-19, the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have remained resolute in the execution of their duties. Personnel, both at home and abroad, Mr. Speaker, have been deliberately engaged toward mitigating the negative effects of Dorian and the pandemic in an effort to bring relief to our people from all across the globe. We learned many lessons, and more importantly, we saw, Mr. Speaker, the true spirit of humanity during this period. Our use of technology to enable working remotely is one of the upsides of the pandemic. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it demonstrates to us that we don't have to travel all over the world in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be able to accomplish some of the same things that we've been able to do during the pandemic. But you know, as social creatures, human beings, you know, I miss my colleagues when I see them on the screen in these virtual meetings. You know, you miss them and you say, well, you know, I'd like to see you soon so we can shake hands and reconnect. A seminal mandate of the ministry, Mr. Speaker, remains the strengthening of our foreign relations with regional and hemispheric partners in the international community. All our relations should benefit Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, in our economy and in our security. That's a mantra that we have at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that's something that we work toward every time we interact and engage with our international colleagues. In addition, we continue to promote and maintain very strong relations with our neighboring countries, particularly those with whom we share maritime borders, as well as our bilateral and multilateral partners and the community of nations. One example, Mr. Speaker, of our engagement, of which I'm exceptionally proud, can be seen in the ministry's war on COVID-19. Our efforts as an intermediary in facilitating the procurement of numerous health and medical supplies from friends and the international community, as we join the all-government approach geared toward beating back the deadly COVID pandemic. We spoke about India and the vaccines earlier, Mr. Speaker. We need not relitigate that. So, Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would like to publicly thank our friends from around the globe, particularly India, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the People's Republic of China, Brazil, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, for their generous support of our people. In the fight against COVID-19, apart from monetary donations, the Bahamas was the recipient of diverse forms of help, inclusive of, but not limited to, personal protective equipment, PPEs, custom-made partitions to isolate COVID-19 patients, essential medical supplies, and life-saving equipment. Such generous donations have greatly strengthened our capacity to manage the pandemic and to provide frontline workers with the requisite resources to face the war on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, Similarly, we are pleased, very pleased, for the assistance of several international organizations, including the World Health Organization, WHO, PAN, American Health Organization, PAHO, and Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPO, and others that provided and continue to provide support during this pandemic. And so the ministry continues to work in close collaboration with the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Health on various measures to combat this deadly pandemic. In this vein, Mr. Speaker, the ministry continues to work in collaboration with the DRA and NEMA to support post-Dorian reconstruction efforts in Agro and Grand Bahama. We especially thank our fellow Commonwealth country and friend, Mr. Speaker, the Republic of India again, who graciously donated $1 million in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Dorian and has provided an additional $1 million to support the construction of a multi-purpose building to be used as a community center and hurricane shelter in Central Pines, Abaco. We heard the minister say during her presentation that construction is anticipated to begin in early April. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and I were delighted to participate in the groundbreaking ceremony for that center on the 14th of December, 2020. And it is anticipated that the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, for this project will be signed in the coming weeks. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, just ahead of Hurricane Dorian, just ahead of the hurricane season last September, the government of the United States of America provided $3.6 million worth of modular shelters, medical evacuation boats, and construction materials to the DRA in an effort to help our preparation. Such accoutrement significantly enhances our ability to adequately respond following disastrous events such as we saw with Dorian. Mr. Speaker, the Honorary Consular Corps is important to the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the people of the Bahamas. Honorary consuls primarily provide necessary consular services to Bahamian nationals who might find themselves in distress in parts of the world where we have no representation by way of a mission or an embassy. The secondary purpose is to promote the Bahamas and assist in building its economy. Since becoming independent, the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, has appointed 36 honorary consuls in various parts of the world. The secondary purpose of these appointments, Mr. Speaker, was to promote the Bahamas and assist, as I said before, with the building of our economy. As a result of a recent review of our honorary consular corps, there has been some recalibrations. In the results, there are currently 24 honorary consuls who now represent the Bahamas. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, the ministry is currently reviewing jurisdictions where diplomatic relations can be established to the benefit of the Bahamas. In the result, we are in possession of a number of applications from persons who express interest in becoming honorary consuls for the Bahamas. Countries and jurisdictions now under immediate consideration for appointments are Italy, Turkey, Brazil, Canada, Indonesia, Asia, Europe, and various states in the United States of America. Additionally, we are actively in the process of seeking approvals for non-resident ambassadors to South Africa and Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Appointed individuals will not only assist nationals in distress, but also serve, Mr. Speaker, most importantly, to improve the visibility of the Bahamas in the countries to which they are assigned. Mr. Speaker, gone are the days when someone would take a diplomatic plate, put on their vehicle, and just ride around. You know, if you're going to be appointed by a country like the Bahamas, which is yet developing, to be an honorary consul or an ambassador, you should lift the profile of the country, and you should do all you can to attract the kind of business and necessary support and assistance that we need in the Bahamas. That will not happen any longer under my watch. And so, Mr. Speaker, what we did was we had an extensive review of all of those appointed and those who were not performing. Mr. Speaker, we tell them thanks. We appreciate what you've done, but we might go move on a little bit now. You know, so you know, and so, Mr. Speaker, that's what we're seeking to do. And I say this to people in foreign affairs all the time. Your job as a diplomat when you travel is not just to go all across the world and hobnob and go to receptions and the like. When you engage with people, you engage in the interest of the Bahamian people. And we should benefit from your engagement. We should always benefit in our economy. we should always benefit in our security or in some other way that we can bring business back to this country, that Bahamians would be able to see why we spend so much money in foreign affairs and trying to endeavor our best to do foreign relations in the interest of them, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're trying to do. And so members would recall that the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, was elected as the first Caribbean country to the Human Rights Council, the HRC, in 2019. And the term will come to an end in December of this year. As a member of the Human Rights Council, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas had a productive 3-year term and represented not only its own interests, but those of CARICOM, another small island developing states. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the fact that our ambassador, who is in Geneva, is serving as second to the president. The presidency is now held by Fiji. And so, for the first time in history, I'm sure, you have two small island developing states leading this organization, leading this entity. You know, our ambassador is doing a very wonderful job there in Geneva, and we're very pleased that she was able to secure that position. The Bahamas will no longer serve as a member of the council, but will continue its commitment to the protection and preservation of human rights as enshrined in the Constitution of the HRC. Well, Mr. Speaker, I spoke to this already. Being prodded by Pine Ridge, we represented our concern about the procurement and dissemination of vaccines throughout the world at the Human Rights Council. And my ambassador is over there. Member for Pinewood, he's over there shaking his head. The wonderful ambassador represents us in CARICOM, does a great job, and I'm unable to make it. He represents his country quite well, and I'm very pleased to be working alongside him. With respect to the United Kingdom, Mr. Speaker, the UK's exit from the European Union, the EU, the Bahamas signed the CARIFORUM, UK Economic Partnership. That's Keva Bain. That's what I was trying to remember her name in Geneva. Her Excellency Keva Bain, doing a wonderful job in Geneva, which commits to the UK to providing the relevant duty-free terms the CARIFORUM states in the future. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have, I think, signed the EPA, and which will cause us to be able to do business outside of the European Union, with the United Kingdom specifically, in their pursuit of extricating themselves from the European Union. The new norm, Mr. Speaker, brought about by COVID-19 compelled us to find a way for new foreign envoys to commence their representation to the Bahamas, albeit at the functional level. As such, we have received in the virtual realm new emissaries from the Association of Caribbean States, the United Nations, the European Union, Israel, and Qatar. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased about the advances made by the Office of the Spouse, located in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Mrs. Patricia Minnis, through her office, remains an active executive member of the Spouses of the CARICOM Leaders Action Network, or SCLAN, as she was recently appointed chair of that organization for the period 2021 to 2023. Despite the pandemic, the office has remained fully functional and extremely relevant. Mr. Speaker, as noted by the Minister of Social Services during his presentation last evening, besides sourcing locally grown produce for entrepreneurial training and workshops for our young people in processing and the preservation of these foodstuffs, Mrs. Minnis has used her good offices to garner support for many worthwhile projects, inclusive of the procurement of food and clothing and devices such as laptops and tablets for virtual learning, and sewing machines, as mentioned by the member yesterday, for students, and much, much more, Mr. Speaker. In the results, she has assisted some 760 families, inclusive of the physically disabled, in receiving weekly care packages. Mrs. Minnis remains an advocate against gender-based violence, and in collaboration, GBV, and in collaboration with the national, regional, and international organizations such as Social Services and Urban Development, and the Zonta Club of Nassau, and the International Men's Organization, and Caribbean Male Action Network, we call it CARIMAN, toward developing a strategic regional plan for the reduction and elimination of violence against women and children by educating our men and boys on this timely topic. I know the member for Yamakro normally speaks about this. He's very passionate about it. And I think as men, we should all be passionate about it. You know, Mr. Speaker, if you've been married for a little while, sometimes it gets heated. And so, yeah, you know what I mean, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes it gets heated. And so in my young days when it got heated, and this is my advice to most young men now today, when it got heated, I would go in a room and close the door and lock it. And you know, my wife is from Bahama, she's a fiery woman from Sandy Point, right? And I would just barricade myself in there and see if I can get a good night's sleep. I don't know what Dio does.
Boy, I make up I can't go to sleep with my wife. I'm happy now.
But we're long past those days, you know, Mr. Speaker. And so before you, as a young man, you know, or man, before you put your hand on a woman, you should walk away. I have a beautiful little 7-year-old granddaughter. And Mr. Speaker, God forbid I leave that there.
Come get him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you understand, yeah, if you understand my point, if you take my point, and so I want to encourage men, as does my brother from Yamakroa here, to think twice before you cause harm, and you know, the Minister for Social Services and all these clubs, to think twice before you touch a woman. She was not made for that. She was made to be loved. She was made to be cherished, and she was made to be your helpmeet, your partner and your friend. And that's what she was made for, not for you to abuse. And so if you feel you need to let off steam, go on the basketball court, go run. Love her 100 ways, my brother. Oh man, I harken back to them days now when I hear that. Let me find the ways. You know, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that our online services for passport office has not only eliminated the debilitating and long lines at the Oaksfield headquarters, but has essentially nullified the impact of the pandemic upon the delivery of passport services. I remember, yeah, thank you, Secretary George. I remember, Mr. Speaker, I used to be apprehensive with seeing the headlines of the papers in the morning as it relates to the passport office. You know, I've heard stories where people had to go there at 4 a.m. in the morning and just sit there, waiting in order to get a passport, to get an appointment. Thank you. No, COVID didn't do that. We had that before COVID.
No, stop it.
We had that before COVID. Huh? No. No, I can't. I will give you a lot, but I can give it all. The people at the passport office, we led the way and services online, and the way that technology has been able to be introduced in the Bahamas. And we're working very hard on it. And the people down at DIT and the passport office and the Minister of State for Finance, they should all be commended for the effort that they made. Even the Financial Secretary, you know, he sends me from time to time these notes of the kudos, of the words, the kind words of approbation that the passport office and the staff now receives for their delivery of passports. And that's something I'm very, very proud of, something this administration is very, very proud of, Mr. Speaker. And so, on that note, Mr. Speaker, I wish also to commend the managers and staff of the passport office for their commitment to duty and for their commitment to the Bahamian people. As a core team remained on duty throughout the 3-month emergency lockdown period to ensure that our online services continued unabated. You know, Mr. Speaker, in December of 2020, an additional feature was added to the online platform, which now allows for the renewal of e-passports for minors between the ages of 15 and 17 years. For the period of the 1st of July 2020 to the 31st of December 2021, the passport office generated revenue, Mr. Speaker, amounting to some $615,250. That's not bad. That's not bad. Mr. Speaker, but I'm most pleased as an island boy. Very pleased as an island boy that a couple of weeks ago we were able to travel into Exuma on the 12th of February and open a passport office in Georgetown, Exuma. A passport office now which functions in Georgetown, Exuma, to allow the residents of that community and even the Keys. You know, I think they can come even as far as from Ragged Island and come into Exuma and get their passport in a matter of 4 to 5, maybe 6 days. I mean, Mr. Speaker, that's incredible. Can you, yeah, man. Yeah, you like that, Agro? You know, Mr. Speaker, somebody said at that opening that a family of four would likely be able to save something like $2,500, $2,500, because they no longer have to travel into New Providence. You know, island people know but this, you know, when you come to New Providence to live with your family, if you open the fridge too long, they look at you cross-eyed. Y'all know about that, eh? They look at you cross-eyed, and they start looking at you like, I wonder when he got, or wonder how long they can be here. Mr. Speaker, it gives me tremendous gratification as an island boy, and I know the Prime Minister is very pleased with this, that he's able to, his administration is able to provide those services in the island, that we don't have to travel from that island any longer and come to New Providence just to get a passport. We don't have to do that anymore. And so this, Mr. Speaker, is the first of several offices slated to be opened in other family islands in very short order. Mr. Speaker, we plan to travel to Matthew Town in Agro on Friday. You should like this. Where we're going to open Michael a passport office in Matthew Town, that the people of Michael in that area will no longer, you know. Now, we had intended, Mr. Speaker, the following week to go into Long Island and open their passport office, but I communicated with the member for Long Island a while ago, and he might have a conflict with the schedule, and I really would like for him to be there. And so he has to be there, right? And so that we might have to delay that a bit, but that's not to my passport people. You all keep working. You know, we have a young woman that we send into these islands, and I don't want to single out, but Fariba Herman has been doing a wonderful job under the leadership of the Chief Passport Officer, Ms. Williamson. You know, yeah. Sometimes you just gotta do that. You gotta recognize sacrifices and the efforts that people make to get the job done. That's very important, you know. And so, Mr. Speaker, very shortly we'll also go into Governor's Town in Eleuthera in this cycle of opening offices. I'll open someday, and I look forward to the next term. Then we'll be able to put passport offices in all of these islands where there are none. So we don't have to use but those islands that don't have passport offices right now or kiosks, what we'll do is when you have great numbers that you need to renew your passports, we will use the mobile office, the mobile system, and send them into that island. They spend a day or two there, and then you'll be able to do get your passports, do your applications. Mr. Speaker, it is this government's desire to further the decentralization of the passport offices, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. We promised in our manifesto to do it, and Mr. Speaker, by God's grace, we are making it happen. And I'm very proud to be leading that charge on behalf of this minister-led administration. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Consular Division continues to help us in the repatriation of foreign nationals and to provide the necessary emergency documents, like emergency travel documents for Bahamians that are stuck abroad. And you can imagine they have been working overtime in this season of COVID-19 when countries lock down and shut down and our citizens can't come home. And so we encourage all Bahamians traveling to take with you sufficient contingency funding to be able to provide for yourself in the event that you happen to be in a country, Pine Ridge and Pinewood, where, you know, the country just shuts down and you're unable to get back home. For the period under review, the Consular Division, together with our overseas missions, assisted 539 Bahamians in this regard. For the period of July 2020 to February 2021, the Consular Division apostille or legalized 3,669 documents, which generated a revenue of $533,130, Mr. Speaker. For this same period, 627 visas were issued to foreign nationals, resulting in the generation of revenue in the amount of some $64,810. Very proud of the work that these people continue to do. Mr. Speaker, they're unsung heroes, you know. They work behind the scenes where they don't get no glory or no recognition, but they quietly get it done. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I pray, Mr. Speaker, that Almighty God continues to remain and keep the people of North Abaco and Abaco in general. And Mr. Speaker, may God continue to bless and keep the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. As many.
Well, Speaker, I reserve the spot for the good member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
And while I'm on my feet, I will give, I'll move that the business of this house suspend until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021.
The seconder.
Thank you.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this house to suspend to tomorrow morning, Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. The business of this house stands suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021.
All right.